Hi there, friends. Thanks for tuning in to Pika Fiction. We have a fantastic story for you today. What if Ash joined Team Rocket and Jessie and Cassidy fought each other to be his partner? If you enjoy our content, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's jump into the story. Chapter 1, The Shattered Crown. The world was noise. 100,000 souls packed into the Indigo Plateau Stadium, their voices a single, roaring wave that crashed against the plexiglass dome and fell upon the battlefield like a physical weight. On the colossal screen suspended above, Ash Ketchum's face was a mask of grim focus, sweat beading on his brow, his eyes narrowed to slits. Opposite him, his Pikachu was a mirror of that intensity, a tiny, yellow incarnation of defiant will, sparks crackling from his cheeks, his body tensed like a drawn bowstring. They were the last ones standing. His Bulbasaur had fought with the heart of a titan, his Charizard with the fury of a volcano, his Squirtle with the cunning of a river's current. But one by one, they had fallen. Silas's Pokémon were simply, more. Faster, stronger, their attacks hitting with a concussive force that seemed to warp the very air. Now, it all came down to this. His first friend against Silas's last monster, a towering, imperious Alakazam. "This is it, folks," the announcer's voice boomed, echoing with digital delay. "The final showdown. Can Ash Ketchum and his powerhouse Pikachu pull off the upset of the century against Silas's seemingly unstoppable Alakazam?" Ash tuned it out. The noise, the lights, the pressure, it was all just static. The only thing that mattered was the bond, that invisible line of pure energy that connected him to Pikachu. He didn't need to speak. He felt Pikachu's exhaustion, the deep ache in his small muscles, but beneath it, a core of unquenchable fire. "One more push, buddy," Ash thought, the message flying down that line faster than any spoken word. "One more. All we need is one clean shot." Pikachu's tail twitched in acknowledgement. Across the field, Silas smirked. He was everything Ash wasn't, tall, effortlessly handsome, with a lazy, entitled posture. He hadn't broken a sweat the entire match. He leaned back, one hand casually tucked in the pocket of his designer jacket. "Give up, Ketchum. You fought well. For a kid from the sticks." The Alakazam mimicked its trainer's arrogance, its spoons held aloft, its eyes glowing with cold, psychic light. It hadn't even flinched from Pikachu's last quick attack. "Agility, now." Ash commanded, his voice cutting through the din. Pikachu became a golden blur, a streak of lightning tracing impossible angles across the cratered battlefield. He was a master of evasion, a dance of pure speed. But the Alakazam's teleport was wrong. There was no no preemptive shimmer of psychic energy. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, reappearing directly behind Pikachu, a shadow ball already coalescing between its hands. "Behind you!" Ash screamed down the bond. Pikachu reacted instantly, spinning on one foot, his tail whipping around to bat the sphere of dark energy away. The shadow ball exploded against the stadium wall, gouging a black, smoking crater into the reinforced concrete. The crowd gasped. "How?" a trainer in the front row shouted, his voice just barely audible over the general roar. "You can't react that fast." Ash saw it then. A flicker. The briefest shimmer of emerald light from Silas's wrist, partially hidden by his sleeve. A device of some kind. His eyes narrowed. It was there for a split second as the Alakazam teleported, and again just before it launched the shadow ball. It wasn't the Pokémon. It was him. He was feeding it commands, augmenting its speed, its power. He was cheating. The realization hit Ash like a physical blow, cold and sharp. This entire battle, the league he had dedicated his life to, the dream he had chased across the entire Kanto region, it was being stolen from him by a smug fraud with a fancy toy. Anger, pure and hot, surged through him. It was a clean flame, burning away his exhaustion, his doubt. He wouldn't just beat him. He would expose him. "Pikachu, run around." Ash yelled, changing tactics. He wouldn't try to outpredict the machine. He'd overwhelm it. Use the whole field. Don't give it a target. Pikachu understood. He wasn't just dodging now, he was creating chaos. He ricocheted off fallen rocks, kicked up clouds of dust, his movements a symphony of controlled frenzy. The Alakazam's head swiveled, trying to track him, but Pikachu was everywhere at once. The emerald light on Silas's wrist flickered erratically. Having trouble keeping up? Ash taunted, a predator's smile touching his lips for the first time. The crowd roared, sensing the shift. This was the Ash they knew, the relentless, improvisational challenger. Silas's smirk tightened into a sneer. Cute. Let's end this little circus. Alakazam, psychic. The Alakazam's eyes flared. A wave of crushing blue energy erupted outwards, not aimed at Pikachu, but at the entire field. It wasn't an attack, it was a net. The ground buckled. Dust and debris were frozen in midair. Pikachu, caught in the blast, was lifted from his feet, his body seized by an invisible force, his limbs locked in place. He squeaked, a pained, struggling sound that lanced straight into Ash's heart. Now, Pikachu. Ash roared, pouring every ounce of his will, his fury, his desperation down their bond. Thunderbolt. It was the one thing the psychic couldn't stop, a purely internal generation of power. Trapped in the telekinetic grip, Pikachu's body became a conduit. He let out a defiant cry, a sound that was less a name and more a battle prayer. The air itself seemed to split open as a bolt of raw, primal electricity erupted from his body. It was the most powerful thunderbolt he had ever summoned, fueled by Ash's righteous anger. It speared across the field, a jagged spear of golden fury aimed straight at the Alakazam's chest. For a heartbeat, Ash thought he had won. Then the emerald light on Silas's wrist blazed, no longer a flicker but a solid, blinding flare. The Alakazam didn't erect a barrier. It didn't teleport. It simply endured. The thunderbolt, a blast that could have felled a dragonite, slammed into its chest and grounded itself, charring the earth around its feet. The psychic Pokémon shuddered, a low groan echoing in the minds of everyone in the stadium. But it did not fall. It stood, smoking, its eyes burning with a terrifying, alien light. Silas laughed. A genuine, ugly laugh. Did you really think that would work? Ash's blood ran cold. It was impossible. No Pokémon could take a direct hit like that without fainting. The energy from Silas's device was pouring into the Alakazam, acting like a cosmic surge protector, a bottomless well of power. Before Ash could even shout a warning, the Alakazam retaliated. Its own psychic attack, now amplified to an obscene degree, coalesced and focused into a single, needle-thin beam. It shot across the field and struck Pikachu. There was no explosion. No grand display. Just a flash of silent, violent white light. Pikachu's body went limp. The sparks on his cheeks died. He fell from the air like a stone, landing in the dirt with a soft, sickening thud. The psychic bond between them didn't just go quiet, it shattered. Ash felt a phantom pain lance through his own skull, an echo of the psychic overload. He stumbled back, his vision swimming. The silence in the stadium was absolute. 100,000 people held their breath. The referee, a man with a face like worn leather, raised his flag. Pikachu is unable to battle. The winner, and the new Indigo League champion, is Silas. The world came crashing back in. The roar of the crowd was a physical blow, a deafening, disorienting wave of sound. Confetti cannons erupted, showering the field in a storm of multicolored paper. Silas raised his arms in triumph, the picture of victory. His Alakazam teleported to his side, as pristine as it had been at the start of the match. Ash didn't hear it. He didn't see it. He was already running, his legs pumping, his heart hammering against his ribs. He slid to his knees in the dirt beside Pikachu, gathering the small, still form into his arms. "Pikachu. Buddy?" His voice was a raw whisper. "Come on, wake up." Pikachu's chest was barely moving. His fur was singed, and a trickle of blood seeped from the corner of his mouth. He was alive. Barely. A shadow fell over them. Ash looked up into Silas's smug face. "Tough break," Silas said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Maybe you'll have better luck next year. Or maybe you should stick to battling toddlers in Viridian Forest." Ash's gaze flickered to Silas's wrist. The device was gone, the sleeve of his jacket pulled down neatly over it. "You cheated." Silas's smile didn't waver. "Prove it." He turned and walked away, disappearing into a throng of reporters and league officials who swarmed him like flies. Ash was left alone in the center of the field, kneeling in the dirt, holding his broken friend as the world celebrated his defeat. The confetti felt like ash on his skin. The infirmary was a sterile, white hell. The only sounds were the soft, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor and the gentle hum of the ventilation system. Pikachu lay on a small bed, hooked up to a dozen different machines. Chansey had done what she could, but the diagnosis was grim: severe psychic trauma and systemic nervous shock. He would recover. Eventually. But the light in him, that fierce, brilliant spark, was dimmed to a faint glimmer. Ash sat in a hard plastic chair beside the bed, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. He hadn't moved in hours. He just stared at Pikachu, the scene of the battle replaying in his mind on an endless, agonizing loop. The flicker of green light. The impossible endurance. The silent, brutal final attack. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Professor Oak entered, his face etched with lines of concern and weariness. He was followed by Mr. Goodshow, the president of the Pokemon League Committee, a portly man whose smile never quite reached his eyes. "Ash, my boy," Professor Oak began, his voice gentle. "How is he?" "He's alive," Ash said, his own voice flat, devoid of emotion. He didn't look at them. "A truly unfortunate end to a spectacular battle," Mr. Goodshow said, clasping his hands behind his back. "You should be proud, son. Runner-up in the Indigo League is a monumental achievement." Ash finally turned his head, his eyes burning with a cold fire that made both men pause. He cheated. Silas was using a device to boost his Alakazam's power. "I saw it." Professor Oak sighed, a heavy, tired sound. He exchanged a glance with Goodshow. "Ash, in the heat of a battle, it's easy to see things, to imagine. I'm not imagining anything." Ash's voice cracked with raw fury, and he shot to his feet. It was a green light, on his wrist. It flared every time his Alakazam did something impossible. "Are you telling me you didn't see it? That a Pokemon can just absorb a full-power Thunderbolt from Pikachu and not even flinch?" Mr. Goodshow held up a placating hand. "We have reviewed the official footage from multiple angles, Ash. The battle was clean. Silas's Alakazam is simply a prodigy of its species, trained to the peak of its potential." "That's a lie." Ash spat. "You're lying to my face." "We are telling you the official findings," Goodshow corrected, his tone hardening. "Silas is the son of Sylph Company's majority shareholder. An accusation of this magnitude, without concrete proof, would create a diplomatic incident. It would damage the public's faith in the league." The pieces clicked into place. The sterile words, the feigned sympathy, the immediate dismissal. It wasn't about truth. It was about image. It was about money. It was about politics. "So you're just going to cover it up," Ash said, the words tasting like poison. "There is nothing to cover up," Goodshow said firmly. "What the world saw today was a legitimate championship match. My advice to you, young man, is to accept the loss with grace. Show some sportsmanship. Train harder. And come back stronger next year." Ash turned to Professor Oak, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes. He had known this man his entire life. His mentor. His hero. Professor, you believe me, right? Professor Oak looked away, his gaze falling on the floor. He looked old, older than Ash had ever seen him. I believe, he said slowly, his voice heavy with compromise, that sometimes we face opponents who are just stronger. The important thing is to learn from the experience, Ash. To grow. Betrayal. It was a physical sensation, a spear of ice through his chest. It was worse than the loss, worse than the humiliation. The heroes he had looked up to, the institution he had revered, were nothing but hollow facades, willing to sacrifice truth for convenience. The world he had believed in, a world of honor, fair fights, and the unbreakable bond between trainer and Pokémon, was a child's fairy tale. Ash let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. It was a dead sound. I see. He sank back into his chair, turning his attention back to Pikachu. The conversation was over. The men behind him no longer existed. Think about your future, Ash, Goodshow said, his voice softening again, sensing he had won. You have a bright one. Don't tarnish it with bitterness. They left, the door hissing shut behind them, leaving Ash alone in the suffocating white silence. He reached out and gently stroked Pikachu's head, his touch feather-light. They lied, buddy, he thought, the bond between them a weak, frayed thread. They all lied. The whole thing. It's all a lie. He stayed there until night fell, until the beeping of the monitor was the only sound in the universe. Then, with a resolve as cold and hard as diamond, he stood up, carefully lifted Pikachu into his arms, and walked out of the infirmary. He didn't look back. He left his runner-up medal on the empty chair. It felt like a brand. Pallet Town felt wrong. The familiar dirt path, the scent of his mother's garden, the sight of his own house, it was all alien, like a picture of a life that belonged to someone else. He had arrived on the late train, moving like a ghost through the late-night quiet. His mother had been waiting up. She had hugged him, her face a mixture of pride and worry, telling him how proud she was, how amazing he had been. He couldn't meet her eyes. He mumbled something about being tired and went straight to his room, Pikachu cradled against his chest. He didn't sleep. He packed a single bag, a change of clothes, all of his money, and a few rations. He looked at the trophies on his shelf, the 8 gym badges gleaming in the moonlight. They were meaningless symbols of a rigged game. With a sweep of his arm, he knocked them all to the floor. The clatter was loud in the silent house, but he felt nothing. He wrote a short note and left it on his pillow. Mom, I'm sorry. I have to go. Don't worry about me. I'll be okay. Love, Ash. The words felt hollow, another lie in a world full of them. With Pikachu nestled inside his jacket, he slipped out the back door and into the darkness. He didn't head for the lab or say goodbye to anyone else. He just walked, his feet carrying him north, onto the dark, sleeping path of Route 1. He walked for hours, the moon his only companion. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he had to get away, to outrun the phantom applause and the memory of Gucho's smug face. Pikachu stirred in his jacket, letting out a soft, questioning sound. It's okay, buddy, Ash whispered, his hand resting on Pikachu's back. We're on our own now. That's better. We only need each other. The sky began to weep. A light drizzle at first, then a steady, miserable rain. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, tearing at his clothes. Soon, it was a full-blown tempest, lightning splitting the sky, thunder shaking the very ground beneath his feet. He was soaked to the bone, cold and miserable, but he kept walking. The storm outside was a pale reflection of the one raging inside him. He stumbled into a small clearing, the trees offering meager shelter. He huddled at the base of a great oak, pulling his jacket tighter around Pikachu. He was lost, broken, and utterly alone. This was it. This was the bottom. Then he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A rhythmic, mechanical chopping that cut through the roar of the wind and rain. He looked up, shielding his eyes. A pinprick of light descended from the churning black clouds. It grew larger, resolving into a searchlight, which swept across the clearing before locking onto him. The sound became a deafening thrum as a helicopter, sleek and black as obsidian, descended with unnerving stability, its rotors whipping the rain into a horizontal tempest. It bore no markings, no registration numbers. It was a predator's machine. It hovered 10 feet off the ground, its side door sliding open. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a figure stepped out, landing on the muddy ground as if stepping onto a polished floor. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a sharp, tailored suit that the rain seemed to shun. His dark hair was slicked back, his face a chiseled sculpture of power and authority. At his side, a magnificent Persian stood sentinel, its muscles coiled, its gaze as cold and calculating as its master's. Ash knew him. Everyone knew him. Giovanni. The enigmatic gym leader of Viridian City, and the rumored, shadowy mastermind behind Team Rocket. Giovanni walked toward him, his expensive shoes sinking into the mud without the slightest hesitation. The Persian padded silently at his heel. He stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. The roar of the helicopter was a constant, oppressive presence. Ash Ketchum, Giovanni said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that carried effortlessly over the storm. He didn't shout, he simply spoke, and the world seemed to quiet itself to listen. A difficult night. Ash scrambled to his feet, instinctively pulling Pikachu closer. He didn't know what to do. Fight? Run? He was exhausted, and this man radiated an aura of danger that made the storm feel like a gentle spring shower. Giovanni didn't make a threatening move. He simply watched Ash, his eyes analytical, intelligent. "I watched your match," he said. "All of it. From my private box." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I saw what you saw." Ash froze. The flicker of light, Giovanni continued, his voice calm, almost conversational. The impossible recovery. The perfectly augmented attacks. A fascinating piece of black market tech. A neural accelerator, if I'm not mistaken. Links the trainer's strategic thoughts directly to the Pokémon's nervous system, bypassing reaction time. Brutally effective. And, of course, completely illegal. Every word was a confirmation of the truth Ash had been denied. He stared at Giovanni, his heart pounding. "You believe me?" Ash's voice was barely a whisper. "Belief is irrelevant," Giovanni replied, a faint, humorless smile touching his lips. "I deal in facts. And the fact is, you were cheated. Not just by Silas, but by the entire system you placed your faith in. They fed you to the wolves to protect their brand. They patted you on the head and told you to be a good little loser, because your inconvenient truth threatened their comfortable world of lies." He took another step closer. "They celebrate mediocrity, Ash, because they fear true strength. They build a world on rules and sportsmanship to keep the truly powerful in check. They are afraid of what a boy like you, with a bond like yours, could truly become if you were unshackled from their moralistic games." He was putting words to the formless rage that had been boiling in Ash's soul. He was articulating the ugly truth that Ash had only just begun to understand. "What do you want?" Ash asked, his voice trembling slightly. Giovanni's eyes gleamed in the helicopter's searchlight. "I want to offer you a place in a different world. A world where strength is the only virtue. Where loyalty is rewarded, ambition is cultivated, and power is taken, not given. I don't want you to be a good trainer, Ash. Good trainers lose. I want you to be a master. The kind they write cautionary tales about." He extended a hand, palm up. "An invitation. The world you knew cast you out today, Giovanni said, his voice dropping, becoming almost hypnotic. They showed you your place. I am offering you the chance to build a new world, one where you stand at the very top. Join me. Join Team Rocket. Ash looked from Giovanni's outstretched hand to the sleeping form of Pikachu in his jacket. He thought of Gucho's condescending smile, of Professor Oak's averted eyes, of Silas's mocking laugh. He thought of the runner-up medal, a symbol of his honorable, celebrated failure. The world Giovanni described wasn't a world of evil. It was a world of consequence. A world of truth. In the face of all the lies, it was the only thing that made sense. He looked back at Giovanni, his young face hardening in the stormy light, the last vestiges of the idealistic boy from Pallet Town washing away in the rain. He took a deep breath. When do I start? Giovanni's smile was thin, sharp, and victorious. He didn't shake Ash's hand. He simply gestured toward the helicopter. Now. Ash walked past him and climbed into the surprisingly plush interior of the machine. The door slid shut, and the roar of the storm was instantly muted, replaced by the steady thrum of the engine. As the helicopter ascended, banking sharply toward Viridian City, Ash looked down one last time at the dark, winding path of Route 1. It looked small and insignificant from up here. A part of a world he no longer belonged to. The Viridian City gym was not the pristine, gladiatorial arena he had imagined. The public facade was closed for renovations. The back entrance led to a labyrinth of cold, concrete corridors, lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs. The air smelled of ozone, stale coffee, and quiet desperation. This was the real Team Rocket, not a glamorous empire, but a gritty, functional machine. Giovanni led him to a small, windowless office and left him with a final instruction: this will be your command center. Your first unit is waiting for your briefing in the mess hall. Show them what you're made of. Ash spent a few minutes alone, letting Pikachu out of his jacket. His partner was awake now, looking around the bleak room with wary, intelligent eyes. He looked up at Ash, a question in his gaze. It's different, Ash said quietly, stroking his head. But it's real. And no one will ever cheat us again. Pikachu seemed to understand. He gave a small, determined nod, and a tiny, defiant spark crackled on his cheek. With a newfound sense of purpose, Ash walked out of the office and down the hall, following the sound of muffled arguing. He stopped at the entrance to a cramped, dingy room that served as a mess hall. At a grimy table, slumped over bowls of instant noodles, were three figures he recognized with a jolt of disbelief. A woman with an absurdly long mane of magenta hair, a man with floppy lavender hair, and a Meowth. The same bumbling, incompetent trio that had tried and failed to steal Pikachu 100 times. It's your turn to re-up the noodle supply, James. Jessie whined, poking at her bowl. I did it last week. I'm feeling a bit faint, Jess, James moaned dramatically. My delicate constitution requires rest, not menial labor. And I require something that ain't flavored like cardboard. Meowth grumbled, pushing his bowl away. For what we get paid, you'd think they could spring for some tuna-flavored stuff. It's a disgrace. We're top-tier agents. Jessie snorted. We're on sanitation duty for the next month because you tried to use a pitfall trap inside the Celadon game corner. A grunt in a standard black uniform entered the room and cleared his throat nervously. Ahem. Attention. Your new commanding officer has arrived. Jessie, James, and Meowth looked up, their expressions a mixture of annoyance and disinterest. About time, Jessie scoffed. Probably some pencil pusher from Johto who thinks he knows everything. Maybe he'll have better taste in interior design, James added, gesturing vaguely at the peeling paint. Ash stepped out of the shadows of the doorway, into the weak light of the room. He wore the same clothes he'd arrived in, still damp from the storm, but his posture was ramrod straight, his face an unreadable mask. His eyes, cold and assessing, swept over them. The bickering died instantly. Their mouths fell open. Recognition, then utter, baffled disbelief, dawned on their faces. The twerp. Jessie whispered, her fork clattering onto the table. No way, James breathed. Is dat? Meowth squinted. It can't be. Ash said nothing. He simply let the silence hang in the air, thick and heavy. He watched them squirm, watched the cogs turn in their heads as they tried to reconcile the determined but often naive kid they had tormented with the chillingly composed figure standing before them now. Finally, when the silence had stretched to its breaking point, he spoke. His voice was not the excited shout they were used to. It was low, quiet, and carried an undeniable weight of command. Report. Chapter 2, The Forge of Viridian. 3 months can forge a person into a new weapon. 3 months in the cold, concrete heart of the Viridian gym, under the unblinking eye of Giovanni, had burned away the last remnants of Ash Ketchum. In his place stood Ketch. The name, a clipped, sharp echo of his old one, had been his own invention. It was a shearing off of the past, a statement of intent. He was no longer the boy who had knelt in the indigo mud. He was the man who had risen from it. The air in the subterranean training ground was thick with the smell of dust, sweat, and ozone. It was a vast, brutalist cavern carved from the bedrock beneath the city, a place of stark functionality. Here, there were no cheering crowds, no flashy scoreboards. There was only concrete, steel, and the unyielding pursuit of perfection. Ketch stood with his arms crossed, his silhouette a dark, still shape against the harsh glare of the overhead floodlights. His Pikachu was perched on his shoulder, a silent, watchful partner, his posture radiating the same coiled intensity as his trainer. Before them, Jessie, James, and Meowth moved with a nervous energy, their eyes fixed on a pressure plate set into the floor. A single red light glowed on a panel beside it. Status, Ketch's voice was low, cutting through the cavern's echo. It was not a question. It was a demand for information. Pressure-sensitive trigger, Model TR-7, James reported, his voice tight with focus. He was on one knee, examining the plate's housing with a delicate pair of electronic calipers. The foppish, theatrical gestures were gone, replaced by a surgeon's precision. His collector's knowledge, once a source of eccentric rambling, was now a tactical database. Standard issue for mid-level corporate vaults. Weakness is a sonic frequency override, but it's keyed to a specific resonance. One wrong move and, poof. He gestured to a series of scorch marks on the ceiling. Diversion? Ketch asked, his gaze shifting to Jessie. Jessie stood poised, her flamboyant magenta hair tied back in a severe, practical ponytail. She had shed the white uniform for a sleek, black tactical suit that allowed for silent movement. The theatricality was still there, but it was no longer for show. It was a weapon. Ready, Commander. Plan is to simulate a containment breach in Sector Gamma. Standard procedure dictates a 2-minute security shift. It's a small window, but it's a window. Meowth. The Scratch Cat Pokémon was crouched low, his body taut. He held a custom-made sonic pick, a delicate instrument Ketch had designed based on James's research. His usual swagger was replaced by a predator's focus. The wires thinner than a Pidgey's whisker. One twitch, and we're all gettin' a new hairdo, the extra crispy kind. I can do it, but I need total silence. Then get it for him, Ketch said, his eyes locking with Jessie's. Jessie nodded, a flicker of something, respect, fear, something more complex, in her eyes. She tapped a comm link in her ear. This is Viper to Control, she said, her voice dropping into a frantic, panicked pitch that was utterly convincing. We have a breach. I repeat, containment breach in the Grimer pens. It's, oh God, it's everywhere. She let out a blood-curdling scream that was pure, distilled performance art, then clicked off the comm from a speaker on the far wall, a simulated alarm blared to life, casting the cavern in pulsing red light. The trap's panel flickered, its internal sensors momentarily distracted by the new, priority alert. "Now, James!" Ketch commanded. James didn't hesitate. He pressed a device to the floor, sending a low hum into the concrete. Frequency matched. "You have 90 seconds, Meowth." Meowth was already a blur of motion. He scuttled forward, the sonic pick in his paws glowing faintly. He pressed it to the control panel, his ears twitching, his eyes closed in concentration. He was listening, feeling for the precise resonance that would unlock the system without triggering the explosive charge. The red light on the panel began to flash faster. 30 seconds. James hissed, sweat beading on his brow. I'm trying." Meowth muttered, his claws a blur on the device's dials. "It ain't a can opener, you know." Ketch watched, his expression unreadable. He could feel the tension in the air, a palpable, vibrating thing. He saw the slight tremble in James's hands, the desperate focus on Meowth's face. In the past, this was where they would have panicked. This was where their bickering would have doomed them. But not anymore. He had forged them into something new. He had taught them that failure was not an option, because failure in this world wasn't a comedic blast-off into the sky. It was a quiet, permanent end in a cold, dark room. The red light blared, a solid, angry color. The alarm from the speaker let out a final, shrill tone. Too slow, Ketch thought, a flicker of disappointment passing through him. With a speed that seemed to defy physics, he moved. In 2 long strides, he was across the room. "Pikachu, Iron Tail." Pikachu leaped from his shoulder, his tail hardening into a blade of shimmering steel. He didn't aim for the trap. He aimed for the power conduit feeding the entire training grid. With a sharp, metallic clang, his tail sheared through the armored cable set into the wall. Sparks erupted in a violent shower, and the entire cavern was plunged into absolute darkness and silence. A moment later, emergency lights flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows. The pressure plate was dark. The panel was dead. Jessie, James, and Meowth stood frozen, breathing heavily in the sudden quiet. They had failed. Ketch stopped before them, his face half hidden in shadow. The mission parameters were to disarm the trap, not destroy the power source. You had the intelligence, you had the diversion, you had the tools. You failed on execution. The timing was off by 4.7 seconds. In the field, that's not a scorch mark on the ceiling. That's a body bag. All 3 of you. Shame washed over their faces. It wasn't the indignant anger of before. It was the cold, hard acceptance of a critical mistake. What was the flaw? Ketch's voice was soft, but it carried the sting of a whip. James looked down. My frequency calibration was too broad. It took Meowth too long to narrow it down. I should have accounted for a 5% margin of error in the schematics. My diversion was too short, Jessie added, her voice tight. I could have bought them another 30 seconds by faking a casualty report. I stuck to the initial plan instead of adapting. And I got sloppy, Meowth admitted, his ears drooping. I let the timer get in my head. Rushed it. Ketch nodded slowly. This was the real victory. Not the disarmed trap, but this. The immediate, honest, and tactical self-assessment. He had burned the excuses out of them. Good, he said, the single word landing with surprising weight. Your analysis is correct. Fix it. Run the simulation again. And again. Run it until it's as natural as breathing. In this organization, you are either an asset or a liability. There is no in-between. Dismissed. He turned and walked away without another word, Pikachu hopping back onto his shoulder. The trio watched him go, a mixture of awe and terror on their faces. They were no longer the bumbling fools of Team Rocket. They were Ketch's unit. And it was the most terrifying and exhilarating thing that had ever happened to them. The summons came an hour later. A sterile message over the intercom: Commander Ketch, report to the boss's office. Immediately. The title still felt new. He had been a commander for 2 weeks, a promotion earned through a series of flawlessly executed, low-level operations, resource acquisition, rival sabotage, intelligence gathering. He had proven his value. Now, it was time for a real test. Giovanni's office was a world away from the gym's gritty underbelly. Located in the hidden penthouse atop the building, it was a space of quiet, brutalist luxury. A single, vast window looked out over the sprawling expanse of Viridian City, the lights of which glittered like a captured galaxy. The desk was a slab of polished black marble, empty save for a single datapad. Giovanni sat behind it, his Persian at his feet, the picture of serene, absolute power. Ketch, Giovanni said, not looking up from the datapad. Your unit's performance metrics have improved by 400% in the last quarter. Their success rate has risen from 9% to 94%. Explain. I gave them a purpose beyond stealing a specific Pokemon, Ketch answered, his voice even. I identified their core competencies and repurposed them. James's collector obsession became asset analysis. Jessie's theatricality became psychological operations. Meowth's unique nature became an infiltration tool. Their flaws were just misapplied strengths. I gave them a structure in which to apply them correctly. Giovanni finally looked up, a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. You did not retrain them. You reframed them. Ingenious. You see people for the tools they can be. A rare and valuable talent. He gestured to the datapad. A three-dimensional schematic of a familiar, imposing skyscraper appeared, rotating slowly. Sylph Company headquarters in Saffron City. This is your next objective, Giovanni said. Sylph Company has recently completed the final prototype for a new series of stealth emitters. Project Chimera. They render an object undetectable not just to radar and thermal sensors, but to psychic and aura-based detection as well. A true ghost signal. Ketch's eyes narrowed. That was a game-changer. An army, a fleet, a single operative could move with total impunity. The prototype is located in their primary R&D vault on the 47th floor, Giovanni continued. Security is comprehensive. Biometric scanners, psychic dampeners, a dedicated unit of their top security personnel. A frontal assault would be costly and loud. I require a quieter, more elegant solution. He leaned forward slightly. I want you to steal it. Ketch studied the schematic. The building was a fortress. But every fortress had a crack. His mind was already working, dissecting the building's systems, its protocols, its human element. The device is a small, dodecahedron-shaped object, Giovanni added, his voice dropping slightly. It is known as the resonant key. It is of singular importance to my long-term plans. Failure to acquire it is not an acceptable outcome. The cryptic name, the unusual weight Giovanni placed on it, this was more than just a technology heist. This was part of the bigger picture, the one Giovanni had only ever hinted at. This was the next step on the path he had been promised. My team will need full access to Sylpha's internal architectural plans, security shift rotations, and employee manifests for the last 6 months, Ketch said. And a budget for custom equipment. Giovanni smiled, a thin, predatory expression. You already have it. I trust you will not disappoint me, Commander. Ketch gave a sharp, single nod. I won't. He turned and left the opulent office, his mind already a whirlwind of strategy and calculation. The boy who dreamed of badges was gone. The man who planned grand larceny was here. And he was hungry. The next week was a blur of intense, focused preparation. Their small, grimy office became a war room, its walls covered in blueprints, timelines, and personnel photos. The scent of stale coffee was now mixed with the sharp, metallic smell of soldering equipment. James, in his element, pored over the Sylph schematics, his eyes alight with a feverish glee. It's beautiful. They're using a Klefki-based biometric lock system on the lower levels. The patent indicates it uses the key's unique energy signature as part of the encryption. But, he tapped a diagram with a flourish, the initial field tests showed a sonic resonance flaw in the locking mechanism of the maintenance shafts. They patched it in the main entrances, but the service elevators, they never bothered. It's an oversight. An arrogant oversight. Jessie, meanwhile, was crafting a persona. She had a new uniform, not Team Rocket black, but the sharp, gray suit of a Sylph company middle manager. Her hair was pulled back into a severe bun, and she wore glasses that gave her an air of stressed, impatient authority. She practiced her walk, her voice, her signature on a forged ID card. Her name is Eleanor Vance, Assistant Director of Logistics, Jessie explained, pacing the room. She has a reputation for being demanding, unpleasant, and perpetually behind schedule. According to the internal memos, she's feuding with the head of R&D. I'm going to go to the front desk and demand an unscheduled access audit of the R&D labs, citing interdepartmental security concerns. I'll make a scene. A big one. Security will be so busy dealing with the hysterical Director Vance, that they won't even notice two maintenance workers and their specialized equipment slipping in the back. Meowth was practicing his own part. Ketch had built a scale model of the ventilation shaft leading to the 47th floor, complete with laser grids and motion sensors salvaged from their own training yard. For hours on end, Meowth navigated the tight space, his movements becoming more fluid, more silent with each pass. He was no longer a cat walking on two legs, he was a whisper in the dark. Ketch orchestrated it all. He was the conductor of their chaotic symphony, refining every detail, anticipating every contingency. He drilled them on fallback plans, on communication protocols, on emergency extraction points. He was relentless, demanding, and for the first time in their lives, Jessie, James, and Meowth felt the intoxicating thrill of true competence. They were a razor-sharp blade, and Ketch was the hand that wielded them. The night of the operation arrived, cold and clear. A sliver of moon hung over the glittering megalopolis of Saffron City. From a rented room in a building across the street, Ketch watched the Sylph Company tower through a pair of high-powered binoculars. Pikachu sat on the windowsill beside him, his gaze as focused as his trainer's. Phase 1, initiate, Ketch spoke into his comm on the street below, a black town car pulled up to the curb. Jessie, as Eleanor Vance, stepped out and stormed toward the gleaming glass doors of the tower, a look of pure fury on her face. The lobby of Sylph Company was a cathedral of corporate power. Soaring ceilings, polished marble floors, and a holographic globe of the world spinning serenely in the center. Jessie strode past it without a glance, her heels clicking in angry rhythm on the floor. I need to speak with Security Command, now, she snapped at the receptionist, slapping a forged ID badge on the counter. I have reason to believe the R&D department has been falsifying their security logs, and I am here to conduct an immediate, unscheduled audit. The receptionist, a young man with a placid smile, looked flustered. Ma'am, all audits have to be scheduled 2 weeks in advance. Do you know who I am? Jessie's voice rose, drawing the attention of the two guards near the entrance. I am Eleanor Vance. If a single piece of my department's logistical data is compromised because your glorified key turners in R&D are cutting corners, it will be your job I have, sonny boy. Get me your supervisor. It was a masterclass in performance. The perfect blend of arrogance, urgency, and bureaucratic jargon. As the supervisor was called and 2 more guards were drawn into the escalating argument, no one noticed the service entrance at the side of the building slide open for a fraction of a second. James and Meowth slipped inside, dressed in drab maintenance uniforms. James held a device to the lock, which emitted a low, warbling tone. The lock clicked open. They were in. Nice work, Jess, James whispered into his comm as they hurried down a sterile white corridor. She's a natural. Phase 2, underway, Ketch's voice replied, calm and steady in their ears. Proceed to maintenance elevator 4B. You have 6 minutes until their next patrol sweep. They moved with practiced efficiency, their footsteps silent. They found the elevator, and James quickly bypassed the keypad. The doors slid open, and they stepped inside. Going up, Meowth said, a hint of his old bravado returning. The ascent was silent and tense. They emerged into a dark, dusty service corridor on the 47th floor. According to the plans, the R&D vault was just through the opposite wall. Okay, kitty cat, James murmured, pointing to a ventilation grate near the ceiling. It's your show. Laser grid is on a 3-second rotation. Motion sensors are pressure sensitive. Light and quiet. Yeah, I got this, Meowth grunted. He scurried up a stack of crates and pried the grate open. With a final glance back, he slipped into the darkness of the shaft. The journey through the vents was a nightmare of precision. Meowth moved like a liquid shadow, his body contorting to avoid the sweeping red lines of the lasers, his paws landing with impossible softness to avoid triggering the sensors. He could hear his own heart beating in the silence. Finally, he saw it, a grate looking down into the vault itself. The vault was a circular room, stark white and brutally clean. In the center, on a pedestal, sat the objective. A dodecahedron carved from a stone so black it seemed to drink the light. It hummed with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. The resonant key. I'm in position, Meowth whispered into his comm, the package is here. Looks spooky. Stand by, Ketch's voice returned. Jessie is about to gain access. When the door opens, you have 10 seconds to retrieve the key and get back into the shaft. James, be ready to create a power surge on my mark. It will mask the energy displacement of the key being removed. Down in the lobby, Jessie's manufactured outrage had reached its crescendo. She had successfully escalated the situation to the point where the head of building security, a grim-faced woman with a grand bull at her side, had personally come down to deal with her. And I will not stand for it. Jessie shrieked. I demand access to that vault now to cross-reference the logs. That is out of the question, the security chief said, her voice like grinding gravel. That is a level 5 restricted area. Then you are obstructing a corporate investigation. Jessie shot back. And I will have your badge for it. It was the perfect distraction. As all eyes were on the unfolding drama, a single, black-clad figure detached from the shadows of a nearby alcove. Ketch, with Pikachu on his shoulder, moved with an unnatural fluidity, a ghost in the machine. He didn't use the elevators. He used the emergency stairwell, ascending the 47 floors in a fraction of the time it should have taken, his movements a blur of controlled power. He arrived at the vault door just as Jessie's voice came over his comm, they're not budging, Commander. Stalemate. Understood, Ketch replied. He placed his hand on the biometric panel next to the vault door. It glowed red. Access denied. Plan B, then, he murmured. Pikachu, quick attack. Hit the panel. Pikachu shot from his shoulder, a yellow bolt of lightning. He didn't slam into the panel, he struck it with a precise, focused impact, his body charged with just enough electricity to short out the biometric reader without triggering the alarm. The panel sparked and went dark. At the same time, the lights in the entire building flickered violently. Mark, Ketch said into his comm in the service corridor. James slammed his hand down on a makeshift circuit breaker he'd wired into the wall. Surge deployed. Inside the vault, the brief power fluctuation caused the pedestal's containment field to flicker for a single, crucial second. Meowth, now. Ketch ordered. From the vent above, Meowth dropped like a stone, landing silently on the pedestal. He snatched the resonant key, its cold, smooth surface thrumming in his paws, and leaped back toward the vent just as the containment field snapped back into place. He scrambled inside, his heart pounding. It was a perfect, multi-layered infiltration. Clean, quiet, and utterly brilliant. And then, it all went wrong. As Ketch turned to leave, the door at the end of the corridor slid open. A security team stood there, their Pokémon, a Mach-Hoke, an Arcanine, and a Magneton, ready for battle. Leading them was a trainer Ketch recognized. A tall, confident young man with a cocky grin and a Raichu at his side. Leo. A rival from the Silver Conference. A trainer known for his aggressive, by-the-book tactics. And, apparently, a Sylph Company security officer. Well, Leo said, his grin widening. Look what we have here. A little rat, caught in the trap. His eyes scanned Ketch's dark uniform. Team Rocket. Pathetic. I always knew you'd amount to nothing, Ketchum. Ketch's face remained a cold, impassive mask. He didn't rise to the bait. You're out of your league, Leo. Leave now. Leo laughed. I don't think so. This is my jurisdiction. And you're under arrest. He pointed a finger at Ketch. Raichu, Thunder Shock. The Raichu unleashed a blast of electricity, but Ketch didn't even flinch. Pikachu. Dodge. Pikachu moved before the word was even fully spoken. He sidestepped the attack with contemptuous ease, the bolt of lightning singeing the wall where he had been a nanosecond before. This wasn't a league battle. There were no rules here. No honor. Only victory. Neutralize them, Ketch said, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. What happened next was not a battle. It was a dissection. Pikachu moved with a terrifying, lethal grace. He shot forward in a quick attack that wasn't aimed at the enemy Pokémon, but at the trainers. He zipped past the Mach-Hoke, and its trainer cried out, clutching his leg where Pikachu had struck a nerve cluster. The man crumpled to the ground. Arcanine, Flamethrower, another guard yelled, panicked. Pikachu, Iron Tail. The sprinkler system, Ketch commanded. Pikachu leaped into the air, his tail glowing. He spun, not hitting the Arcanine, but slicing through a water pipe on the ceiling. The emergency sprinklers erupted, dousing the corridor in a sudden downpour. The Arcanine's flames sputtered and died. The Magneton short-circuited, letting out a shower of sparks before crashing to the floor. Leo stared, his cocky grin gone, replaced by disbelief. What are you doing? This isn't how you battle. This isn't a battle, Ketch said, his voice cold. He took a step forward, the water dripping from his black uniform. This is pest control. From her position across the street, Jessie had been rerouted from her diversion, now acting as Overwatch. She watched the chaos unfold through a hacked security feed on a datapad. She saw Ketch's team execute their plan with flawless precision. And then she saw the confrontation. She saw Leo, a trainer she recognized from the league broadcasts. She saw him posture, saw him attack. And then she saw Ketch respond. Her breath caught in her throat. He wasn't the boy she used to mock. He wasn't even just a competent commander. He was magnificent. The way he stood, unmoving in the face of attack, the absolute confidence in his voice, the chilling efficiency of his commands. He wasn't playing a game, he was a king claiming his territory, sweeping aside annoyances with a bored, lethal flick of his wrist. He radiated a power that was more than just Pokémon strength. It was an aura of pure, unshakable will. And in that moment, watching him dismantle his opposition with such effortless dominance, a feeling she had been suppressing for weeks bloomed in her chest, hot and undeniable. It was awe. It was fear. And it was a deep, thrilling current of attraction. Back in the corridor, only Leo and his Raichu were left standing. Raichu, Volt Tackle. Full power. Leo screamed, his voice raw with desperation. The Raichu enveloped itself in a crackling aura of immense electrical power and charged, a living cannonball of pure energy. Ketch didn't move. Pikachu. Meet it. Pikachu shot forward. He didn't use an attack. He just ran, his body low to the ground. At the last possible second, as the Raichu was about to slam into him, Pikachu slid, a spray of water rising around him. He didn't try to block the Volt tackle. He redirected it. Using the momentum of the charge and the slickness of the wet floor, he got underneath his evolved counterpart, placed his paws on its chest, and pushed. It was a move of impossible physics and perfect timing. The Raichu, its trajectory altered by a fraction of a degree, shot past him and slammed headfirst into the wall with a sickening crunch. It slid to the floor, unconscious. Leo stared at his defeated Pokémon, then at Ketch, his face pale with shock and terror. How? Ketch walked past him without a glance, Pikachu hopping back onto his shoulder. You were a speed bump, Leo. Nothing more. He tapped his comm, all units, extraction point Alpha. Rendezvous in 5 minutes. He disappeared into the stairwell, leaving Leo standing alone in the flooded, darkened corridor, surrounded by his defeated team, the only sounds the dripping of the sprinklers and the dying crackle of his own career. Back in the grim reality of the Viridian Gym, the atmosphere was electric. The trio was buzzing, high on the adrenaline of their first true, major success. Did you see the look on that security chief's face? Jessie laughed, pulling her hair free from its severe bun. I thought her Granbull was going to have a stroke. And the schematics were perfect. James preened, polishing his calipers. A classic case of corporate hubris. Never underestimate the laziness of the maintenance department. And I got the loot. Meowth declared, placing the resonant key on the table. It sat there, absorbing the light, its presence seeming to deaden the sound in the room. We're the best. The absolute best. They looked at Ketch, expecting praise, a shared moment of celebration. But he was already looking past them, his mind on the next move, the next objective. It was an acceptable outcome, he said, his voice flat. He picked up the resonant key. It was cold to the touch, and it seemed to thrum in time with his own heartbeat. You executed your roles. Do not get complacent. Success is the expected standard, not a cause for celebration. Debrief in 1 hour. I want a full after-action report, focusing on potential points of failure and areas for improvement. Dismissed. He left them there, their celebratory mood instantly deflating, replaced by the now familiar mix of awe and trepidation. Later that night, Jessie stood in front of the cracked mirror in her small, sterile room. She looked at her reflection, at the Team Rocket R on her uniform. For years, it had been a symbol of her ambition, her rebellion, her failed dreams. Now, it felt like something else. It was the uniform of Ketch's unit. His weapon. She thought of his cold eyes, the quiet confidence in his voice, the way he had moved through Sylph Company not like a thief, but like an owner taking back what was his. The boy was gone. In his place was a man who bent the world to his will. A man she found herself wanting to follow not just out of duty, but out of a fierce, desperate loyalty she didn't understand. She touched the R on her chest, a strange, complicated heat rising in her cheeks. Ketch stood once more in Giovanni's penthouse office. The resonant key sat on the black marble desk between them. Flawless, Giovanni said. It was the highest praise Ketch had ever heard from him. You have exceeded my expectations, Commander. He picked up the key, turning it over in his hand. This is the first piece. Many more are required. Your next operation will be more complex. It will require less brute force and more finesse. You will be seizing control of a research facility, and for that, you will need a partner who understands the subtleties of command. Giovanni looked at Ketch, his eyes sharp, analytical. Your current unit is effective for field operations, but they are emotionally compromised. Their loyalty is to you, personally. It is a strength, but also a potential weakness. For this next phase, you require a cooler head. Someone who sees the mission, not the man. He pressed a button on his desk. A file appeared on the large screen behind him. It showed a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a cool, professional demeanor. Her hair was a distinctive shade of blue-green, cut in a severe, no-nonsense style. Her partner, a brawny man with an almost comically serious expression, stood slightly behind her. "Agent Cassidy," Giovanni said. "She is one of my most efficient and ambitious operatives. You will be co-leading the Cinnabar Island operation. Her analytical mind will complement your strategic vision. Do not underestimate her." Ketch looked at the image of the woman on the screen. He saw the ambition, the cold intelligence. She was a different kind of tool. A different kind of weapon. And a new, more complicated challenge. "Understood, sir," Ketch said. He was rising through the ranks, his power and influence growing with every victory. But he could feel the game changing, the stakes getting higher. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the path ahead would be paved with rivalries far more dangerous than the ones he had left behind in the Pokémon League. Chapter 3, A Rival's Shadow. The salt spray of the Cinnabar coast tasted like rust and secrets. Ketch stood on the black sand beach, the setting sun bleeding crimson and violet across the horizon, painting the smoking peak of the island's volcano in apocalyptic hues. The air was hot, thick with the smell of sulfur and the sea. Beside him, Pikachu's ears twitched, catching sounds on the wind that were lost to human hearing, the cry of a distant wind gull, the low groan of cooling magma, the approaching thrum of a high-speed boat. He had arrived ahead of schedule, a habit now ingrained in his very being. Punctuality was a form of control. It allowed him to own the space, to analyze the terrain, to set the terms of the engagement before the other party even arrived. His team, Jessie, James, and Meowth, were stationed a quarter-mile down the coast, securing their exfiltration route. They were a well-oiled machine now, his machine, and the thought brought a flicker of grim satisfaction. The boat, a sleek, black speedboat with the telltale angular design of Team Rocket engineering, cut through the waves and slid silently onto the beach. The engine died with a soft hydraulic hiss. A figure stepped out onto the sand, her movements economical and precise. Cassidy. She was exactly as her file had described, and yet, the datapad had failed to capture the sheer force of her presence. It was a cold presence, a stark contrast to the simmering heat of the island. Her blue-green hair was cut in a sharp, asymmetrical style that framed a face of cool, intelligent angles. She wore a tailored, high-collared Team Rocket uniform that was more akin to a corporate executive's attire than a field agent's. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, swept over the landscape, then settled on Ketch. They were not welcoming. They were assessing, measuring, judging. Behind her, a mountain of a man lumbered out of the boat. Butch. His perpetual scowl seemed etched into his face, and he carried himself with the stiff, resentful posture of a man forever relegated to the role of subordinate. He gave Ketch a cursory, dismissive glance and immediately began checking the boat's mooring. "Commander Ketch," Cassidy said. Her voice was like ice chips in a glass, sharp and clear. There was no warmth, no pleasantry. It was a statement of fact. "You're early." "I'm on time," Ketch replied, his tone as flat and unyielding as hers. "You're late." A flicker of annoyance crossed her features, so brief it was almost imperceptible. She was not used to being put on the back foot. Traffic from the mainland was congested. She gestured vaguely toward the smoldering volcano. "Our objective. The Cinnabar lab. According to my intel, Dr. Fuji's team is finalizing their seismic survey of the Kanto Trench. Giovanni wants that data. It's the key to pinpointing the location of a significant deep-sea anomaly." "I've read the mission brief," Ketch said, turning his gaze back to the lab, a sterile white structure nestled precariously close to the volcano's base. It looked small, vulnerable. "The anomaly is designated Site Omega. The data is the map." "Correct," Cassidy said, taking a step to stand beside him. She smelled faintly of antiseptic and ambition. My partner and I have prepared a full infiltration plan. It's a data-driven, three-phase operation. Phase 1, Butch will create a diversion by triggering a small, controlled seismic event on the volcano's eastern flank, using a sonic resonator. This will draw the majority of the lab's security and research staff outside. Phase 2, I will infiltrate the server room during the ensuing chaos and initiate a hard data transfer. It will take approximately 12 minutes. Phase 3, we exfiltrate before their external security consultant can arrive. Ketch remains silent, his eyes scanning the lab, the surrounding terrain, the wind patterns. Cassidy's lips thinned. She clearly expected an immediate acknowledgement of her plan's brilliance. It's efficient, clean, and minimizes potential contact. The probability of success is 97%. Your plan is flawed, Ketch said without turning to look at her. Butch, who had been tying a knot with unnecessary force, stopped and glared. Flawed? We've been running ops like this since you were still learning how to throw a pokeball, kid. Cassidy held up a hand, silencing him. Her cold eyes narrowed on Ketch. Explain. You've accounted for the lab's staff and their internal security, Ketch said, his voice a low murmur. You haven't accounted for the island itself. Or its guardian. He pointed toward a building separate from the main lab. It was older, more traditional in its architecture. The Cinnabar Gym. Blaine. He's the external security consultant your plan dismisses. He's not some rent-a-cop who will show up late. This is his island. He is part of its ecosystem. Your seismic event won't just draw out the lab coats. It will draw him out. Immediately. And he won't go to the eastern flank to investigate. He'll go straight to the lab to protect it. He finally turned to face her, his gaze direct and unwavering. Your 97% success rate drops to less than 20 the moment he arrives. You'll be trapped in the server room with a high-level gym leader blocking your only exit. Your plan is a cage. Cassidy's jaw tightened. She was a creature of data and probabilities, and he had just introduced a variable she had willfully ignored, the human element. The unpredictable, passionate protector. She hated it. But she couldn't refute it. And your alternative? She asked, her voice clipped. From Ketch's comlink, a voice crackled, laced with barely concealed hostility. Our alternative is to not use a sledgehammer to open a lockbox. It was Jessie. She had been listening in, as per Ketch's instructions. A moment later, Jessie's lithe form appeared from the dunes, flanked by James and Meowth. She stopped a few feet away, her arms crossed, her eyes locked on Cassidy in a display of overt territoriality. The air crackled with an immediate, palpable animosity. It was the clash of two alpha lionesses, one fiery and passionate, the other icy and controlled. And you are? Cassidy asked, her tone dripping with condescension as she looked Jessie up and down. Commander Ketch's senior operative, Jessie snapped back, putting heavy emphasis on the title. And we don't do data-driven. We do results-driven. How quaint, Cassidy retorted, a cruel little smile playing on her lips. Tell me, does your method involve dramatic monologues and failing to capture a single Pikachu? Jessie's face flushed with anger. The old insult, wielded with surgical precision. Before she could launch into a furious tirade, Ketch spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a shard of obsidian. Enough. The single word silenced them both. Jessie bit back her retort, her loyalty to Ketch overriding her pride. Cassidy's smirk vanished, replaced by a grudging respect for the authority he commanded. This is not a competition, Ketch stated, his gaze sweeping over all of them. It is a mission. Your rivalry is a liability. Put it aside, or I will put you both on the next boat back to Viridian, and you can explain your failure to Giovanni personally. The threat was stark and effective. Ketch turned back to the lab. Cassidy, your assessment of the lab's internal systems is sound. Your diversion is clumsy. Jessie, your team is adaptable, but lacks the technical expertise for a data breach of this complexity. We will use a hybrid approach. He began to pace, his mind working, weaving their disparate strengths into a new, more lethal tapestry. Here is the new plan. Phase 1, Jessie, you and your team will not be the diversion. You will be the primary infiltration unit. You will pose as a group of volcanologist students from the mainland with a scheduled appointment to interview Dr. Fuji. James, your knowledge of obscure academic credentials will get you through the front door. Jessie, your talent for performance will sell the lie. Meowth, you will be concealed as a specialized piece of sensor equipment. Jessie's eyes lit up. This was her element. Deception. Performance. A leading role. While you have Fuji occupied, Ketch continued, his gaze shifting to Cassidy, you will plant a micro-repeater on their central server terminal. It's a passive device. They won't detect it. Once it's active, it will broadcast the server's data on a secure, encrypted frequency. You, Cassidy, will not enter the lab. You and Butch will be positioned on the volcano's ridge, here. He pointed to a spot on the western slope. You will receive the data stream. Your role is technical support and overwatch. Cassidy's expression soured. She was being relegated to a support role. Sidelined. And the diversion? What about Blaine? There will be no diversion, Ketch said. A diversion creates noise. Noise attracts attention. We will be ghosts. We go in clean, we get the data, we leave. Blaine will be in his gym, meditating or sipping tea, and he will never know we were here. He stopped pacing and looked at them, his plan laid bare. It was elegant, audacious, and relied on a perfect fusion of their conflicting styles, Jessie's flair for social engineering, Cassidy's technical prowess. Cassidy was quiet for a long moment, processing. The plan was better. It was undeniably, infuriatingly better. It was more subtle, more intelligent, and it correctly utilized every asset, including her own. It relegated her to a secondary position, a sting to her pride, but she could not argue with its tactical superiority. Fine, she conceded, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. We will proceed with your plan, Commander. The grudging respect was now tinged with a flicker of genuine curiosity. This twerp wasn't just an upstart Giovanni had taken a liking to. He was a natural strategist, a leader who saw the whole board in a way she, with all her data and analysis, had not. The realization was both irritating and intriguing. As they dispersed to their assigned positions, Jessie shot Cassidy a triumphant smirk. Cassidy ignored her, her mind already focused on the mission, and on the enigmatic young man now giving her orders. The battle for Cinnabar had begun, but another, more personal conflict had just been declared. The Cinnabar lab lobby was bright, clean, and smelled of sterilized air. A young, enthusiastic researcher greeted them, checking their forged credentials on a datapad. Professors from LaRousse University. Welcome. Dr. Fuji is very excited to speak with you. He so rarely gets to discuss his theoretical work with peers. The pleasure is all ours, James said, adjusting his glasses with an air of academic gravitas. We've been following his work on magmatic resonance for years. Groundbreaking stuff. Jessie, playing the part of a keen but slightly overwhelmed grad student, nodded enthusiastically. Meowth was tucked inside a modified seismograph, a single whisker twitching with irritation at being referred to as equipment. They were led into a spacious office where an elderly man with kind eyes and a wild shock of white hair rose to greet them. Dr. Fuji. He was the gentle heart of this high-tech facility. Welcome, welcome, he beamed. It's an honor. As James and Dr. Fuji immediately launched into a passionate, jargon-filled discussion about plate tectonics, Jessie began her part of the dance. She feigned intense interest, moving around the office, examining charts and geological maps on the walls. Fascinating, Doctor, she exclaimed, her eyes wide with manufactured wonder. And this is your central server hub. The nerve center of the whole operation. She gestured to a large terminal humming quietly in the corner of the office. Ah, yes, Fuji said, momentarily distracted from his conversation with James. Every piece of data we collect, from every sensor on the island, funnels through there. It's the most advanced geological array in the world. Incredible, Jessie breathed. As Fuji turned back to James, her hand darted out, a shadow's movement. She pressed a device no larger than a thumbnail to the underside of the terminal. A tiny green light blinked once, then went dark. The micro-repeater was in place. She caught James's eye and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Well, Doctor, James said, checking his watch. This has been wonderfully enlightening, but I'm afraid we have a ferry to catch. We wouldn't want to take up any more of your valuable time. They made their excuses, shook hands, and were escorted out of the lab. It had been flawless. 20 minutes, in and out. No alarms, no suspicion. They were ghosts. As they stepped back into the hot cinnabar air, Jessie tapped her comm. Viper to Overwatch. The package is delivered. We're clear. On the volcano's ridge, Cassidy sat before a complex array of receivers and processors, Butch standing guard behind her. Acknowledged, Viper, she replied, her fingers flying across a holographic keyboard. Acquiring signal, now. A stream of complex code began to flood her screen. Seismic readings, thermal maps, deep-sea sonar pings. It was a torrent of raw data. Signal is strong. Beginning decryption. Estimated time to full download, 10 minutes. It was perfect. Ketch's plan had worked perfectly. The thought was galling. And then, a new icon appeared on her threat assessment display. An energy signature she did not recognize. It was not seismic. It was not electrical. It was bioenergetic, but on a massive scale. And it was moving. Fast. Ketch, she said, her voice tight with alarm. We have a problem. An anomalous energy reading just appeared on the island's northern shore. It's massive. Down on the beach, Ketch was watching the lab through his binoculars. Define massive. On the scale of a legendary Pokémon, Cassidy's voice was strained. It's moving towards the lab. Fast. Whatever it is, it felt the data stream. Our passive operation is no longer passive. Ketch cursed under his breath. They had been too clean, too quiet. They had avoided the island's human guardian, only to attract the attention of something far older. Through his binoculars, he saw him. Blaine, the Cinnabar gym leader, burst from the doors of his gym, not in his usual lab coat, but in a fire-retardant battle suit. His face was a mask of grim urgency. He wasn't looking towards the ridge where the diversion was supposed to have been. He was looking north. He had felt it too. Abort, Ketch said into his comm, all units, fall back to the exfiltration point. Now. We don't have the full data packet. Cassidy protested. Another 4 minutes. We have a new priority, survival, Ketch snapped. Get your team and move. But it was too late. From the lab, a new, blaring alarm began to sound. A proximity alert. On Cassidy's screen, the energy signature was now descending on the lab at an impossible speed. And then, Blaine made his move. He threw a poke ball, and a massive, furious magmortar erupted into existence, roaring a challenge. Blaine leaped onto its back. We have to protect the data, he yelled, his voice barely audible over the wind and alarms. He wasn't evacuating. He was making a stand. Ketch's mind raced. The mission was compromised. His teams were exposed. And a gym leader was about to engage an unknown, overwhelming force, right on their doorstep. This was no longer a heist. It was a chaotic, three-way battlefield. He watched as Blaine's magmortar launched a volley of fireballs at an unseen enemy in the sky. He saw the fireballs dissipate against a shimmering, invisible barrier. And then he saw the source of the energy signature. It descended from the sky like a fallen god, a creature of majestic, terrifying power. A flash of blue and silver, with enormous, hand-like wings. Lugia. The guardian of the seas. It hadn't been drawn by their technology. It had been drawn by the content of the data, the mapping of its sacred, hidden territory. Lugia let out a cry, a sound that was both song and storm, a psychic blast of pure territorial rage that washed over the island. The lab's windows shattered. Cassidy cried out in pain as the psychic wave slammed into her, her sensitive equipment exploding in a shower of sparks. Butch grabbed her and dragged her back, his own face pale. On the beach, Jessie and James stumbled, clutching their heads. Only Ketch and Pikachu remained standing, buffered by the innate, protective field of Ketch's own powerful aura. He watched as Lugia unleashed a beam of concentrated energy, an aeroblast, at the lab. Blaine's magmortar met the blast with a full-power fire blast. The two attacks collided in mid-air, a cataclysmic explosion of fire and wind that shook the island to its foundations. The ground buckled. The side of the volcano groaned, and a plume of black smoke billowed from its peak. Blaine was hopelessly outmatched, but he was buying them time. Precious seconds. Ketch made a split-second decision. The mission had failed, but he would not leave empty-handed. And he would not sacrifice his people. Cassidy. What data did you get? He yelled into the comm. Fragments, she gasped, recovering from the psychic shock. Seismic maps, incomplete coordinates. It's not enough. Send it to me, Ketch commanded. He pulled a ruggedized datapad from his belt. Jessie, James, Meowth. Get to the extraction point. Provide covering fire if you can, but your priority is to get the boat ready. Go. His team scrambled to obey, their faith in his command absolute even in the midst of chaos. He turned to Pikachu. We're not leaving without something to show for this. Get ready. With a speed that defied belief, Ketch began to run, not away from the battle, but towards it. He sprinted along the black sand, a dark blur against the chaos, his destination not the lab, but the gym. He burst through the gym's main doors. The interior was a battlefield of its own, with lava pools and rock platforms. But he ignored the arena, heading for a small, private study in the back. Blaine's office. The data had been broadcast from the lab, but a man like Blaine, paranoid, brilliant, and protective, would have a backup. A local copy. He found it almost immediately, a hardened server humming away under the main desk. He slammed his datapad against its port, initiating a forced, high-speed data transfer. Lines of code scrolled across his screen. It was the same data Cassidy had been downloading. He was getting the rest of it. Outside, the battle raged. He could hear the roar of Lugia, the defiant shouts of Blaine. He could feel the ground shake with each impact. 30 seconds, he thought. That's all I need. The door to the office was blasted off its hinges. Blaine stood there, framed in smoke and fire, his face grim, his magmortar at his side, scorched and breathing heavily. You, Blaine breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief, then hardening with fury. Team Rocket. It was you. You brought this curse down on my island. I'm just a scavenger, cleaning up after the storm, Ketch said, not looking up from the datapad. The transfer was at 80%. You will not steal my life's work. Blaine roared. Magmortar, fire blast. The massive Pokémon opened its maw, a star of pure fire coalescing within. Pikachu, Thunderbolt, Ketch said, his voice calm, almost bored. Pikachu leaped from his shoulder, a golden missile of righteous fury. He didn't aim for Magmortar. He aimed for the ceiling. The bolt of lightning struck a network of pipes, the same sprinkler system Ketch had used at Sylph Company. But these pipes didn't hold water. They held supercooled nitrogen, used to instantly cool the gym's lava pools for safety. The pipes burst. A cloud of cryogenic fog billowed downwards, instantly enveloping the room. The temperature plummeted. Magmortar's fire blast sputtered, reduced to a pathetic puff of steam. The fire Pokémon let out a pained roar, its body ill-suited for the sudden, extreme cold. 95%. Blaine stared in shock at the tactical brilliance of the move. He hadn't been beaten by power. He had been beaten by intelligence. His own gym's safety systems, turned against him. Download complete. Ketch ripped the datapad from the port and turned to face Blaine. Thank you for your cooperation, Professor. He ran for the shattered doorway, Pikachu at his heels. Blaine, recovering, shouted a command, but it was too late. Ketch was gone. He emerged back onto the beach just in time to see Lugia, its patience finally exhausted, preparing another, larger aeroblast, this one aimed at the peak of the volcano itself. It was going to trigger a full-scale eruption to bury the entire island, and the secret of Site Omega with it. The speedboat was waiting at the water's edge, Meowth frantically trying to start the engine, Jessie and James providing sporadic, ineffective covering fire with their Pokémon. Further up the beach, Butch was half-carrying a dazed Cassidy toward them. They weren't going to make it. Ketch didn't hesitate. He poured his own energy, his aura, into the bond with Pikachu. Pikachu. Maximum power. Volt tackle. Aim for the water. Pikachu became a comet of pure electricity, slamming not into Lugia, but into the ocean at its feet. The resulting explosion of electrified water was colossal. A massive wave of charged seawater erupted upwards, shorting out Lugia's aeroblast in a flash of steam and ozone. The legendary Pokémon roared in shock and pain, momentarily blinded and disoriented by the unexpected tactic. It was the opening they needed. Ketch sprinted the last few yards and leaped into the boat just as Cassidy and Butch tumbled in. Go, he yelled at Meowth. The engine roared to life, and the boat shot away from the shore, skipping over the turbulent waves. They looked back. Lugia had recovered, its eyes burning with divine rage. Blaine stood on the shore, watching them go, a figure of defeated fury. The island, shrouded in steam and smoke, seemed to shrink behind them. They had failed the mission as planned. But they had survived. And they had the data. Cassidy was slumped in her seat, clutching a scorched arm, her cool composure shattered. She looked at Ketch, who was calmly checking the data on his pad, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. He hadn't just salvaged the mission. He had outmaneuvered a gym leader, fought a legendary Pokémon, and saved all their lives, all while his own plan was crumbling around him. He hadn't panicked. He had adapted, improvised, and dominated. The flicker of curiosity she had felt earlier now ignited into something more. It was a grudging, sharp, and deeply unsettling admiration. He was more than a strategist. He was a force of nature in his own right. Jessie, from the bow of the boat, was also staring at him, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and adoration. She had seen him run towards the god beast, towards the explosion, to secure their victory. He was fearless. He was brilliant. He was everything she had ever wanted to be. As the boat sped into the open ocean, leaving the smoking island behind, Ketch finally looked up from his datapad. He met Cassidy's gaze, then Jessie's. He saw the complex, conflicting emotions in their eyes, rivalry, admiration, possessiveness. He had them both, balanced on a knife's edge. For now, it was a weapon he could use. But the silence in the boat was heavy with a new, unspoken tension. The mission had forged a new dynamic between the three of them, a triangle of ambition, rivalry, and a dangerous, burgeoning loyalty all pointed at the man in the center. And on the horizon, unseen by any of them, a sleek, impossibly fast aircraft banked in the sky. Inside, a man with a flowing cape and piercing eyes watched the fleeing speedboat on a monitor. Energy signature confirmed, Lance of the Elite Four said, his voice grim. Its aura. Strong, and tainted by a resonance I haven't felt in 1,000 years. He turned to the woman sitting opposite him, her long blonde hair gleaming in the cockpit's low light. Cynthia. Our worst fears are realized. Someone is gathering the keys. The hunt had begun. Chapter 4, The Sunken Temples whisper. The ocean was a sheet of black glass under a starless sky. The only light came from the instrument panels of the Hades, a state-of-the-art Team Rocket submersible, as it descended into the crushing, silent blackness of the Kanto Trench. Inside, the recycled air was cold and carried the metallic tang of high-voltage machinery. The only sounds were the low thrum of the engine and the periodic, groaning protest of the hull against the immense, mounting pressure. Ketch stood at the forward viewport, his hands braced against the cold plasteel, staring out into the absolute void. The data from Cinnabar had led them here, to a precise set of coordinates miles beneath the surface, a place cartographers had marked as empty, lifeless abyss. But Giovanni had been certain. Site Omega, he had called it. The first lock. Pikachu was a small, warm weight on his shoulder, his red cheeks glowing softly in the gloom, a tiny beacon of life in this dead, abyssal world. Behind him, the claustrophobic confines of the sub's main cabin amplified the simmering tension. Jessie and Cassidy were a study in contrasts, a volatile mixture of fire and ice forced into a pressure cooker. Jessie paced the narrow aisle, her movements agitated, her energy too vibrant for the cramped space. She kept glancing at Ketch, her expression a mix of concern and fierce pride. Cassidy sat bolted to a console, her fingers a blur across a holographic interface, her face illuminated by cascading lines of code. She was a pillar of cold focus, but the slight, tight set of her jaw betrayed the strain. The Cinnabar operation had changed them. It had shattered Cassidy's professional arrogance and replaced it with a wary, watchful respect for Ketch. For Jessie, it had solidified her burgeoning adoration into something fiercer, more possessive. They orbited him now like binary stars, one burning hot, the other cold and dense, both locked in his gravitational pull. The rivalry had deepened from a simple clash of personalities into a silent, intense battle for proximity, for relevance, for his attention. Pressure at 900 atmospheres, Cassidy reported, her voice devoid of emotion. Hull integrity at 99%. We are approaching the target depth. Anything on sonar? Ketch asked, not taking his eyes from the viewport. Negative, Cassidy replied. The readings are impossible. It's like the space ahead is absorbing the sonar pings. There's a dead zone, a void where there should be seabed. The anomaly, Ketch murmured. The resonant key, secured in a specialized, lead-lined container on the command console, seemed to thrum with a faint, sympathetic vibration. That's one word for it, Jessie muttered from behind him, her arms crossed tightly. I prefer, terrifying black hole of doom. She stepped closer to the viewport, peering into the darkness. What exactly are we supposed to find down here, Commander? Giovanni was a little light on the details. He said it was a temple, Ketch answered, his voice low. A prison. The resonant key is not a key to a door. It's a key to a lock. Before Jessie could press him further, the sub's forward floodlights flickered and died. The thrum of the engine sputtered. The cabin was plunged into a disorienting, absolute darkness, the only illumination coming from Pikachu's cheeks and Cassidy's dying holographic display. What was that? James's panicked voice crackled from the engine room comm, we just lost primary power. All systems are failing. Emergency power online, Cassidy's voice was tight, strained. But something is actively draining us. An electromagnetic field of unknown origin. The hull groaned, a deep, resonant sound like a dying beast. The sub lurched violently, throwing Jessie against a bulkhead. Ketch, anchored by his own sense of balance, didn't move, but he felt it, a strange, disorienting pressure not on the hull, but on his mind. A subtle warping of space, a feeling of vertigo and nausea. "We've crossed the threshold," he said, a strange certainty in his voice. His aura was flaring, a subconscious defense against the non-Euclidean wrongness of this place. "Commander," Cassidy said, her voice laced with something he had never heard from her before, "all." "Look." He looked. Where there had been only blackness, there was now structure. The floodlights, now operating on flickering emergency power, revealed it. A colossal, sprawling edifice rising from the seabed, a city-sized temple of impossible architecture. It was carved from a stone that was not black, but a shade of purple so deep it seemed to swallow the light. The angles were all wrong, twisting and turning in ways that made the eyes water and the brain ache. Spires curved in on themselves, archways led to nowhere, and vast, cyclopean walls were inscribed with glyphs that seemed to squirm and writhe at the edge of vision. The submersible was no longer descending. It was being drawn, pulled into a massive, hangar-like opening in the temple's side. "It's pulling us in," Jessie whispered, her face pale in the flickering light. "It's like it was waiting for us." The sub slid into the opening and came to a gentle stop on a wide, flat platform. The water within the hangar bay began to drain with impossible speed, recycled by unseen mechanisms. Within moments, they were resting in a dry, cavernous chamber, the air thick with the scent of ozone and ancient, sterile dust. The silence was profound, absolute. "Mission objective," Ketch said, breaking the spell, his voice a steady anchor in the surreal environment. "Locate the central altar. Place the key. That's it. No exploration. No engagement. We are here to turn a key, nothing more." He looked at his team, his gaze hard. "We stay together. We move fast. We get out." He unsealed the submersible's hatch. The air that rushed in was cold, dry, and unnervingly still. He stepped out onto the platform, Pikachu leaping from his shoulder to scout ahead, his small body a tense knot of wariness. Jessie and Cassidy followed close behind, their rivalry momentarily forgotten, replaced by a shared sense of profound dread and wonder. They moved through vast, echoing corridors that defied logic. Gravity seemed to shift subtly under their feet, and hallways would occasionally twist, leading them up a wall or across a ceiling without any sense of disorientation until they looked back and saw their footprints trailing up a vertical surface. The silence was a constant pressure, broken only by their footsteps and a faint, intermittent whisper that seemed to come from inside their own minds. It wasn't a voice. It was a feeling, a suggestion of thought. Images and emotions bled into their consciousness, fleeting and disturbing. Jessie saw a flash of a vibrant, alien forest under a crimson sun, then felt a pang of crushing loneliness. Cassidy saw a complex, star-spanning equation that she almost understood, its elegance filling her with a brief, ecstatic joy before it vanished, leaving only frustration in its wake. Ketch felt it most keenly. His aura, a sensitive instrument for life and energy, was being bombarded. The whispers were louder for him, a torrent of chaotic, disconnected concepts. Creation unmaking hunger time as a circle the lie of form. He gritted his teeth, forcing it back, erecting a wall of pure willpower around his mind. The chaotic energy, this dissonance, as Giovanni had hinted, it was like a raw, untamed force of nature, the static between realities. "This way," he said, pointing down a corridor that seemed to lead into a solid wall. As they approached, the wall dissolved into a shimmering curtain of light, revealing the chamber beyond. It was the heart of the temple. A colossal, spherical cavern, its walls shifting and flowing with nascent, half-formed constellations. In the very center, suspended in mid-air by an unseen force, was a simple, unadorned altar of the same light-devouring stone. The central altar, Cassidy breathed, her analytical mind struggling to categorize what she was seeing. The energy readings are off the scale. It's a stable singularity, a pocket of folded space-time. It's a cage, Ketch corrected, his eyes fixed on the altar. He could feel it now, the immense, sleeping presence locked within. And we're about to rattle the bars. He retrieved the resonant key from its container. It was warm now, almost hot to the touch, and it pulsed with a faint, dark light, eager to be reunited with its lock. A bridge of faint, shimmering energy formed between the platform they stood on and the floating altar. "Stay here," he commanded. "If anything happens, get back to the sub. Do not wait for me." Jessie took a step forward, her hand outstretched. "Ketch, no. This feels wrong. This is more than just technology. This is something else. That's why I have to be the one to do it," he said, his gaze softening for a fraction of a second as he looked at her. The flicker of genuine concern in her eyes was a stark contrast to the cold, calculating world he now inhabited. It was a dangerous, human complication. He turned to Cassidy. "Keep the comm channel open. Record everything." Cassidy just nodded, her face grim, her eyes wide with a mixture of scientific curiosity and primal fear. Ketch walked out onto the bridge of light, each step taking him further into the heart of the anomaly. The whispers in his mind grew to a roar, a chaotic symphony of alien thought. He felt the press of millennia, the weight of forgotten creations and cosmic annihilations. The dissonance was not evil. It was simply, is. A force of pure, untamed chaos, the raw material of reality before order had been imposed upon it. He reached the altar. It was cold, its surface impossibly smooth. A single, dodecahedron-shaped indentation marred its surface. The lock. He took a deep breath, braced himself, and placed the resonant key into the indentation. It fit perfectly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the key, the altar, and the very air around them erupted in a silent explosion of black light. The dissonance, the unraveled, was unleashed. It didn't flood the room. It flooded him. It surged up his arm, not as energy, but as pure information, pure potential. It bypassed his physical form and slammed directly into his consciousness, his soul. He saw it all. The birth of galaxies from roiling, formless chaos. The forging of time and space by a will of unimaginable power, Arceus. The imposition of law, of order, of a single, defined reality upon the infinite possibilities of the dissonance. He saw this temple being built, not to worship a god, but to imprison a concept. The concept of other. His mind, his very being, threatened to unravel, to dissolve into the infinite, screaming potential. But something held him together. His aura. It flared to life, not as a defense, but as a container. It was the one thing in existence that could bridge the gap between ordered life and raw chaos. It was the vessel Giovanni had known he would be. His aura absorbed the dissonant energy, containing it, shaping it, but not taming it. It was like trying to hold a supernova in a glass jar. He screamed, a raw, soundless scream that echoed in the minds of Jessie and Cassidy. His body convulsed, lifted from the altar, suspended in the center of a swirling vortex of black and gold light, the chaos of the dissonance and the order of his own aura, locked in a violent, symbiotic dance. On the platform, Jessie watched in horror, her hands clapped over her mouth. "Catch!" She started to run toward him, onto the bridge of light, but Cassidy grabbed her arm, her grip like iron. "No!" Cassidy shouted, her voice shaking but firm. "You can't. The energy field would tear you apart." She was pointing at her datapad, which was screaming with alarms. The readings were nonsensical, numbers and symbols flashing on the screen that had no basis in known physics. He's become the epicenter of a reality distortion event. Jessie struggled against her grip, tears streaming down her face. "We can't just leave him. We're not leaving." Cassidy yelled, her own fear momentarily eclipsed by a surge of analytical fury. She was recording, analyzing, trying to make sense of the impossible. This was the greatest scientific discovery in history, and it was killing the only man who had ever earned her unequivocal respect. The temple was beginning to tear itself apart. The walls of the cavern groaned, stone grinding against stone. Chunks of the impossible architecture began to break away, falling into the swirling void below. Jessie stopped struggling. She looked past the vortex of energy, at the man at its center. He was in agony. She could feel it, a faint echo of his pain through the bond of loyalty and affection she had forged with him. She couldn't reach him physically. But maybe she could reach him another way. Catch, she screamed, pouring all her will, all her emotion, all her desperate, fierce loyalty into his name. Ash. Fight it. Don't let it take you. Come back. The use of his old name, a name no one had spoken in months, a name he himself had discarded, cut through the chaotic storm of the dissonance. It was an anchor. A single, solid point in a sea of infinite variables. A reminder of the person he had been, of the bonds he had forged, of the world he was a part of. Inside the storm, Ketch heard her. The name was a lifeline. It gave his struggling will a focal point. He wasn't just a vessel. He was Ash Ketchum. He was Ketch. He had a will, a purpose. He would not be unmade. With a final, defiant roar of will, he seized control. He didn't suppress the dissonance. He accepted it. He let it flow through his aura, not as a flood, but as a river through a channel. He became the living lock, the conscious interface between order and chaos. The vortex collapsed. The black and gold light rushed inward, pouring into his body, not vanishing, but integrating. He fell to his knees on the altar, gasping, his body trembling. The whispers in his mind quieted, no longer a chaotic roar, but a constant, low hum at the edge of his perception, a source of immense, terrifying power he could now touch, now feel. The temple gave a final, shuddering groan. The bridge of light flickered and died. The altar began to plummet into the darkness. Without thinking, Jessie acted. Arbok, go. Use poison sting. Her Arbok shot from its poke ball, a purple blur. It fired a volley of energized needles, not at Ketch, but at the wall behind him. They embedded themselves in the stone. Now, wrap around him and pull. The Arbok's tail shot out, wrapping securely around Ketch's waist just as the altar fell away beneath him. It strained, its muscles bulging, holding him fast. Cassidy, help her. James's voice shouted from the platform. He and Meowth were there, having emerged from the sub. James's wheezing was already spewing a thick cloud of sludge, creating a makeshift anchor point on the crumbling platform for Arbok to pull against. Cassidy, shaken from her scientific trance, reacted instantly. Butch. You're Mac Hoke. We need brute strength. Butch hurled a poke ball, and his powerful Mac Hoke emerged, its muscles gleaming. It grabbed the Arbok's tail and began to heave, pulling with all its might. Together, they hauled him back, foot by agonizing foot, from the edge of the abyss. They dragged him onto the relative safety of the platform just as the rest of the central cavern collapsed into itself with a deafening, final implosion. Ketch lay on the ground, conscious but utterly drained, his body still humming with a terrifying, alien energy. Jessie knelt beside him, gently cradling his head in her lap. You came back, she whispered, her voice choked with relief. He looked up at her, his eyes different now. The cold, hard focus was still there, but beneath it, in their depths, swirled a galaxy of captured chaos. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss was now a part of him. You called me, he said, his voice raspy. It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of everything. In that moment, the rivalry, the mission, the world outside, it all fell away. There was only the connection between them, the anchor she had been for him. Cassidy stood over them, her datapad forgotten in her hand. She watched the raw, unguarded emotion between Ketch and Jessie. She saw the way he looked at Jessie, the gratitude, the deep, resonant connection. And she felt a sharp, unexpected pang of something. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was the cold, clinical realization that she had been trying to connect with him on a strategic and intellectual level, while Jessie had, without trying, forged a bond with him on a fundamental, emotional one. She had analyzed the storm. Jessie had called him out of it. And in that moment, Cassidy understood she was losing a battle she hadn't even known she was fighting. Their brief, fragile moment was shattered by an ear-splitting sonar ping that reverberated through the entire temple. What was that? James asked, looking around nervously. Cassidy's head snapped up, her professional instincts taking over. That wasn't ours. It was a high-frequency, military-grade scan. Someone is outside. And they're powerful. As if on cue, a section of the cavern wall 100 yards away exploded inward. Water, pressurized to 1,000 atmospheres, blasted into the chamber, a solid, unstoppable jet of pure force. The temple, its structural integrity already compromised, began to flood at an alarming rate. Through the breach, a new submersible, larger and more menacing than their own, forced its way inside. It was sleek and angular, shaped like a Garchomp, and it bore the emblem of the Pokémon League's Elite Four. The submersible's main hatch opened, and a figure emerged, standing silhouetted against the blinding torrent of water and light. She was tall and impossibly elegant, with long, blonde hair that seemed to float in the turbulent air. A Garchomp materialized at her side, its dorsal fin cutting through the rising water, its eyes burning with intelligence and predatory intent. Cynthia. The champion of Sinnoh. And, as Ketch knew from Giovanni's most secret files, a high-ranking member of a clandestine order sworn to protect the world from the very power he now held within him. The Aegis Guard. She had not come to arrest them. Her face was a mask of cold, grim resolve. She had come to sterilize the site. The dissonance has been awakened. Cynthia's voice was calm, but it carried over the roar of the flood, resonating with a power that was almost as unsettling as the temple itself. The vessel must be neutralized. This ends now. She raised a hand, and her Garchomp let out a roar, a challenge that promised utter annihilation. They were trapped, miles beneath the sea, in a collapsing temple, with a force of nature inside them and a living god of battle blocking their only escape. Chapter 5, The Ghost of Pallet Town. The flight back to the mainland was a tense, humming silence, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the stolen League submarine's engines. They had escaped. The word felt hollow, inadequate for the reality of what had happened. They hadn't defeated Cynthia, they had merely slipped through her fingers in a maelstrom of chaos. The moment her Garchomp had roared its challenge, Ketch had acted. There was no thought, only instinct, a cold and perfect strategic clarity born from the chaotic wellspring now residing within him. He hadn't commanded a battle. He had commanded a collapse. James, wheezing. Full power smoke screen, now. Cassidy, the sub's reactor, overload it. But that's our only way out. We're not taking our sub. We're taking hers. The plan had been insane, suicidal, and executed with the flawless desperation of the damned. James's wheezing had filled the flooding cavern with a blinding, choking cloud of black smoke. Under its cover, Cassidy, her fingers flying with a newfound, frantic purpose, had bypassed the safety protocols on the Hades's reactor, turning their submersible into a time bomb. As Cynthia and her Garchomp had charged into the smoke, expecting a fight, Ketch and his team, guided by his aura sight which cut through the gloom like a beacon, had slipped past them. They'd boarded the Aegis Guard's own sub, its hatch still open, and sealed the door just as their own vessel detonated behind them. The explosion, magnified by the crushing deep-sea pressure, had been catastrophic. It had blown a new exit through the collapsing temple and sent Cynthia's sub rocketing out into the open trench on the shockwave, buying them the crucial seconds they needed to escape. It was a victory, but it felt like a retreat from a force far beyond their comprehension. Now, hours later, Ketch sat alone in the stolen sub's command chair. The vessel was a marvel of technology, generations ahead of Team Rocket's own designs. He had already locked out its remote tracking systems and wiped its navigation logs. He was a ghost, piloting a ghost ship. He held up a hand in the dim light of the cabin. A faint, dark energy, like smoke trapped under glass, swirled just beneath his skin. The dissonance. It was quiet now, a sleeping predator coiled around his soul. It didn't whisper anymore. It simply was. A part of him. He could feel its immense, chaotic potential, a formless power that he could, with concentration, touch and shape. When he had commanded Pikachu to unleash a thunderbolt during their escape, the attack had been subtly different, faster, more focused, imbued with a strange, disruptive quality that had made the Garchomp flinch. He was a conduit. A living weapon. The door to the command cabin hissed open. Jessie entered, carrying a steaming mug. She moved with a quiet grace that had replaced her old, theatrical swagger. The events in the temple had changed her, too. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective resolve. She had seen him at his most vulnerable and had been his anchor. That had forged a bond between them that was stronger than any mission directive. "Coffee," she said softly, placing the mug on the console beside him. "You haven't slept." "Sleep is a luxury," he replied, his gaze not leaving the forward sonar display. "Cynthia won't give up. The Aegis Guard is a hunter. They don't get tired. They don't stop. We're safe for now," she insisted, standing beside his chair. She didn't touch him, but her presence was a warmth in the cold, sterile cabin. "That was brilliant, what you did back there. Using their own sub against them." "It was a necessary improvisation," he said, his tone flat. He took a sip of the coffee. It was black and bitter, just how he liked it. How did she know that? He pushed the thought away. It was an irrelevant detail. "Was it?" she pressed, her voice gentle. "Or were you protecting us? You could have used that power inside you. You could have fought her." He turned to look at her then. Her eyes were searching, trying to see past the commander, to find the boy she had called out to in the darkness. "Fighting her would have been a mistake," he said, his voice low. "It would have shown her the extent of what happened in that temple. It would have turned a regional threat into a global one. A strategic withdrawal was the correct tactical choice." He was giving her the commander's answer. The logical, cold, correct answer. But she saw the flicker in his eyes, the briefest glimpse of the weight he now carried. He hadn't fought because he didn't know what would happen if he truly unleashed the dissonance. He was protecting them not just from Cynthia, but from himself. Before she could respond, the sub's main comm crackled to life. It was a Priority 1, encrypted signal from Giovanni. Ketch toggled the channel open. "Commander Ketch," Giovanni's voice was as smooth and cold as polished marble. "Report." "Mission objective partially complete," Ketch stated, falling back into his official persona. "We activated Site Omega, but the asset was compromised by an external faction. An elite unit of the Pokémon League, led by the Sinnoh champion, Cynthia." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Ketch knew Giovanni was aware of the Aegis Guard. This was a test. "Cynthia," Giovanni repeated, a faint, almost imperceptible note of interest in his voice. "They are moving sooner than I anticipated. This complicates things. But you survived. You adapted. And you brought me a prize." He was referring to the stolen submarine. "Well done. But your confrontation with the guard has accelerated my timeline. We must secure the next key, and sever your final lingering liability." "Liability, sir?" Ketch asked, his face a neutral mask. "Your past, Commander," Giovanni said, his voice turning silkily dangerous. "Your history. The world still remembers Ash Ketchum, the idealistic boy from Pallet Town. A boy with a loving mother, a respected mentor, a home full of friends and Pokémon. As long as that boy exists, even as a memory, you have a weakness. A pressure point our enemies can and will exploit. It is time to burn that bridge. To erase that ghost. A cold dread, colder than the abyssal depths, settled in Ketch's stomach. He knew what was coming. Your next assignment is simple, Giovanni continued. You will return to Pallet Town. You will infiltrate Professor Oak's laboratory. You will steal his complete research archives, every file, every note, every piece of data he has ever collected. His work on Pokémon evolution, his private research on legendary Pokémon, it is a treasure trove of information that will be invaluable to us. But more importantly, the act itself will be a message. It will be the final, public death of Ash Ketchum. It will prove to me, and to the world, where your loyalties truly lie. The line went dead. The silence in the command cabin was absolute. Jessie stared at Ketch, her face pale with shock. He can't be serious, she whispered. Go back there. To your home. Steal from the professor. It's monstrous. Ketch said nothing. He stared out into the black water, his reflection a pale, grim face superimposed over the endless dark. Giovanni was right. It was a weakness. His past was an anchor holding him to a world of sentiment and emotion that had no place in his new reality. To be truly free, to be truly powerful, he had to cut the rope. But the thought of it, the cold, clinical reality of walking into that lab, of confronting the old man who had given him his first Pokémon, of betraying that gentle, simple trust, it stirred something deep inside him. A flicker of the boy he had been, crying out in protest. He saw the conflict playing out on Ketch's face, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the dark storm in his eyes. This was not a tactical problem for him. This was a wound. And Giovanni was ordering him to pour salt in it. You can't do it, Jessie said, her voice firm. We can refuse. We can tell Giovanni the risk is too great. We can fake the data, give him something that looks real enough. Ketch turned to her, his eyes cold again, the moment of internal conflict suppressed. Refusal is not an option. Faking the data would be discovered eventually. It would be a betrayal of the trust Giovanni has placed in me. The mission will proceed as ordered. He stood up, his movements stiff. Set a course for the coast south of Pallet Town. We'll make our approach on foot, after dark. He strode out of the cabin, leaving Jessie alone with the humming machines and the cold reality of the order. She watched him go, her heart aching. She had seen that brief flicker of pain, and it terrified her more than any legendary Pokémon or Elite Four champion. The mission wasn't just about stealing data. It was about destroying a part of his soul. And she feared that if he succeeded, the man she had followed into the darkness would be lost for good. The air in Pallet Town was different. It smelled of damp earth, night-blooming jasmine, and memory. Ketch moved through the familiar woods bordering the town like a phantom, his black uniform blending into the shadows. His team followed in silence, their usual banter replaced by a heavy, somber apprehension. Even Meowth was quiet, his ears pinned back. This place was sacred ground to their history with the twerp, and desecrating it felt fundamentally wrong. They stopped at the edge of the woods, looking out over the sleeping town. A few lights glowed in the windows. In the distance, the lights of the Oak Laboratory burned brightly, a beacon of knowledge and, tonight, a target. It's too quiet, James whispered, scanning the area with a pair of night vision goggles. No patrols, no extra security. You'd think after the Sylph and Cinnabar incidents, the League would have every major research facility on high alert. They do, Ketch said, his voice a low murmur. But not here. This is Pallet Town. This is Professor Oak's home. It's a symbol of peace, of the League's benign beginnings. Putting a platoon of guards around it would be an admission of fear. It would create a panic. They're protecting it with sentiment. A foolish mistake. He turned to his team. The plan he had laid out was brutally simple. A direct, lightning-fast assault. James would disable the external communications array. Cassidy and Butch, brought in for technical and muscle, would breach the rear wall. Jessie and Meowth would handle any internal staff. He would go for the central server. It was a classic smash and grab. Loud, destructive, and unambiguous. But as he looked at Jessie's worried face, at the conflict in her eyes that mirrored his own, the words of the plan felt like ash in his mouth. He was about to give the order. He was about to burn the bridge. "Wait," Jessie said suddenly, her voice tight. "There's another way. A better way." Cassidy, who had been impatiently checking her equipment, scoffed. "Better than a coordinated, multi-point strike?" "Unlikely. The commander's plan is tactically sound. It's fast and decisive. It's also brutal and unnecessary," Jessie shot back, her gaze fixed on Ketch. "It's what Giovanni wants you to do. To be a monster. To burn your own home to the ground. Is that who you are?" The question hung in the air, sharp and pointed. Ketch's jaw tightened. Jessie took a step closer, her voice dropping, becoming an urgent, pleading whisper for his ears only. "There's a third option. Not defiance, not monstrous obedience. Strategy. You're a strategist, Ash. Not a blunt instrument. We can do this your way. The smart way." She was offering him an out. Not from the mission, but from the spiritual self-destruction it demanded. She was appealing to the man who had outthought Blaine, not the one who had activated the temple. He looked from her earnest, pleading face to Cassidy's cold, expectant one. Cassidy represented the path Giovanni had laid out for him, pure, ruthless efficiency. She expected him to give the order, to prove he was the cold, hard commander he appeared to be. Jessie represented something else. A path that allowed for cunning and cleverness, a way to win without sacrificing every piece of himself. In that moment, the internal conflict crystallized into a decision. He would not be Giovanni's monster. But he would complete the mission. He would walk the razor's edge between his past and his future. "Change of plans," Ketch announced, his voice firm again, but with a different quality. A spark of the old, improvisational Ash Ketchum had returned. "We are not going in loud. We are not going in hard. We are going to make them think we did." He turned to Cassidy. "You and Butch will still breach the rear wall. But you will not enter. You will plant these." He handed her a small case of electronic devices. "They're wide-spectrum EM pulse emitters. On my signal, you will activate them. It will simulate a massive electronic assault, frying every system in the lab and triggering every alarm. It will create the illusion of a brute force attack." He then looked at James. "You will not disable the communications array. You will hijack it. You'll flood the League security channels with ghost signals and false reports of rocket attacks all over Kanto. They won't know what's real. Saffron, celadone, fuchsia. Light up the whole region. By the time they figure out where the real attack is, we'll be gone." Finally, he looked at Jessie and Meowth. "The chaos is your cover. The professor and his aides will be focused on the electronic attack, the alarms, the communications blackout. They'll be trying to save their systems, not guarding the physical files. You two will create a small, localized diversion, a fire alarm, a gas leak scare, on the opposite side of the lab from the main server room. You will draw everyone away." He paused, letting the new, more complex plan sink in. "While the entire lab is in a state of manufactured panic, I will go in. Alone. I will not steal the data. I will make a perfect, untraceable copy of the entire server. Giovanni gets his prize, the League thinks they were the victims of a failed, destructive raid, and the original research remains untouched." It was brilliant. It was a plan that satisfied every party while giving none of them the whole truth. It was an act of mercy disguised as an act of war. Jessie looked at him, her eyes shining with relief and admiration. This was the man she believed in. Cassidy, however, was staring at him with a new, calculating intensity. This was not the plan of a simple soldier following orders. This was the plan of a king moving his own pieces on the board. He was not just subverting Giovanni's implied intent, he was actively deceiving him, trusting that the acquisition of the data would be enough to cover the deception. It was a risk of breathtaking arrogance. And it was fascinating. She had wanted him to be a sharp weapon, but she was realizing he was forging himself into a throne instead. The power he was cultivating was not for Giovanni. It was for himself. And the thought sent a thrill of cold, ambitious excitement through her. This was a man worth following. "Let's move," Ketch commanded, and they melted back into the shadows, a team united not just by orders, but by the sheer force of his will. The night erupted. On Ketch's signal, the EM pulses hit the lab like a silent thunderclap. Lights flickered and died, alarms shrieked and then sputtered out as their systems were fried. Inside the lab, Professor Oak and his 3 assistants stumbled in the sudden darkness, shouting in confusion. "What was that?" one of them yelled. "An EM pulse." "A massive one," another cried. "The main server is down. All our systems are crashing." Just as they activated the lab's internal emergency power, a new alarm blared, the fire alarm from the specimen wing. A thick, acrid smoke, courtesy of James's wheezing, piped in through a vent, began to pour from under a door. "A fire? Now!" Oak exclaimed, his face etched with panic. "The specimens. We have to get them out." As the professor and his aides rushed toward the false fire, their minds entirely occupied by the cascading disasters, Ketch slipped through a side window, a shadow in the chaos. He moved through the darkened, familiar corridors of the lab, his heart a steady, cold drum in his chest. He passed the room where he had first met Pikachu, the arena where he had fought Gary. The ghosts were here, but he walled them away. They were part of a life that was no longer his. He reached the main server room. The door was locked, but it was a simple mechanical lock, easily bypassed. Inside, the room was dark save for the red glow of emergency error messages on a dozen screens. The air smelled of burnt electronics. He walked to the central server, a towering monolith of metal and wire, and placed his hand on it. It felt cold, dead. He pulled out the datapad from Cinnabar, the one he had used to steal Blaine's research, and plugged it in. Then, he closed his eyes. He reached out with his mind, with the dissonance now coiled within him. He didn't hack the server with code. He persuaded it. He let a fraction of the chaotic, formless energy flow from his fingertips into the machine. The dead server whirred to life, its damaged circuits bypassed by the impossible energy. The red error messages vanished, replaced by the calm, green glow of the main directory. He was in. He initiated the copy, the data flowing at a speed no conventional hardware could handle. Terabytes of research, a lifetime of work, pouring into his datapad in a matter of seconds. And then, the door opened. Professor Oak stood there, holding an old-fashioned fire extinguisher. He had realized the smoke was a decoy, his sharp mind cutting through the chaos. He stared at Ketch, his eyes wide with a pain and disbelief so profound it was like a physical blow. "Ash," he whispered, the name a fragile, broken thing. What are you doing?" Ketch didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the datapad, on the progress bar that was now at 90%. "Hello, Professor," they said. "Team Rocket," Oak's voice trembled. "I didn't believe them. I couldn't." He took a step into the room, his kindly face a mask of utter heartbreak. "Why, Ash? After everything, why?" Ketch remained silent. What could he say? "The world you raised me in was a lie. The honor you taught me is a cage for the weak." The words were a truth he believed, but spoken here, to this man, they would be an act of pointless cruelty. Silence was the only mercy he could offer. Download complete. He ripped the datapad from the port. The server went dark again. He turned to leave. Ash, please, Oak begged, blocking his path. Don't do this. Whatever they've offered you, whatever they've done to you, it's not too late. You can still come home. Ketch looked at him then, truly looked at the old man who had been a grandfather to him. He saw the genuine love, the desperate hope in his eyes. And he felt a sharp, painful pang of loss for the boy who could have accepted that offer. But that boy was dead, and his ghost was standing in this room. He simply pushed past the professor, his shoulder brushing the old man's. He didn't use force. He just moved him. Oak stumbled back, not from the push, but from the cold, alien emptiness he felt in that brief contact. He was touching a stranger. Ketch walked out of the server room and into the dark corridor. He didn't run. He just walked away, leaving the professor standing alone in the ruins of his life's work, the silence of the lab broken only by the old man's soft, heartbroken sobs. He met his team at the designated extraction point in the woods. They were all there, their faces grim in the moonlight. Jessie looked at him, her eyes full of questions she was afraid to ask. He offered no answers. Mission complete, he said, his voice as empty as the corridors he'd left behind. Let's go. They vanished into the night, leaving Pallet Town to its sirens and its sorrow. Ketch did not look back. He had burned the bridge. He had murdered the ghost. And as he walked, he felt the dissonance within him stir, a low, approving hum. He was one step closer to becoming what he was meant to be. He was free. But in the deepest, most secret part of his heart, a part he would never acknowledge, he knew he had never felt more alone. Chapter 6, The Saffron Gambit. Saffron City was a nexus of power, a glittering cage of glass and steel where corporate ambition and political influence were the true currencies. Its arteries pulsed with the flow of data and money, all under the watchful, psychic gaze of its enigmatic gym leader, Sabrina. To control Saffron was to hold a knife to the throat of the Indigo League. And Giovanni, in the wake of Pallet Town, had handed Ketch that knife. The order had been simple and audacious: destabilize it. Seize control. The city is yours to command, or to break. This was not a heist. It was a conquest, a war to be fought not with explosions and brute force, but with whispers, shadows, and the surgical application of fear. It was a test of a different kind of power, and Ketch felt the dissonance within him hum with anticipation. The chaotic energy thrived on unraveling complex systems, on turning order into a weapon against itself. Their base of operations was the penthouse suite of a darkened, disused office building overlooking the heart of the city, a crow's nest in a concrete jungle. The vast room was a web of holographic maps, data streams, and network charts, a digital ghost of the city below. At its center stood Ketch, a still point in the hurricane of information. The Pallet Town operation had solidified his command in a way no previous mission had. He had not only succeeded, but had done so with a breathtaking strategic finesse that had both satisfied Giovanni's objective and preserved his own complex code. It had earned him Jessie's unwavering devotion and, more surprisingly, Cassidy's cold, calculated loyalty. The rivalry between the two women had not vanished, it had sublimated. It was no longer a petty squabble for attention, but a silent competition for strategic relevance, a contest to see who could be the more effective instrument of his will. Cassidy, in this new battlefield of intrigue and manipulation, was in her element. She moved through the data streams like a shark through water, her mind a cold, sharp instrument of analysis. The city's power grid, corporate infrastructure, and league communications are all routed through a central data hub controlled by Sylph Company, she explained, her fingers dancing across a holographic display, isolating networks and tracing connections. It's a closed system, heavily encrypted. But their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. It's a single point of failure. If we can gain control of that hub, we can control the city's nervous system. A direct assault is out of the question, Ketch stated, his eyes tracing the flow of power on the map. Sylph Tower is still on high alert after our last visit. They'll be expecting us. We won't need an assault, Cassidy replied, a thin, predatory smile on her lips. We just need the right key. She brought up a personnel file. It showed a mid-level Sylph Company network administrator named Marcus. His data profile was a sad poem of modern life, mounting gambling debts, a recent messy divorce, a drinking problem. Marcus has top-tier administrative access. He's also desperate. I've already made contact through a secure dark web channel, posing as a corporate espionage agent for a rival company. For the right price, he's willing to grant us a backdoor into the system. A man like that is unreliable, Ketch countered. He could get cold feet. He could betray us. He won't, Cassidy said with chilling certainty. Because 2 hours ago, Butch paid a visit to his bookie. All of Marcus's debts have been consolidated. He no longer owes money to a dozen different criminals. He owes it all to one. Us. He understands that our interest rates are much, much steeper. Ketch gave a slight nod of approval. It was clean. It was ruthless. It was classic Cassidy. Good. Once we have the backdoor, what's the first move? We don't shut them down, Cassidy explained, her eyes gleaming with intellectual fervor. We manipulate. We start subtly. We reroute fractions of a percent from every corporate transaction in the city into an offshore account. We create ghost trades on the stock market that benefit our shell corporations. We slightly delay communications between the league president's office and the Saffron City Council. Small things. Annoyances. Glitches in the system that will sow distrust and confusion among the city's leadership. It was a brilliant strategy, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. They would turn the city's elites against each other, make them believe their rivals were sabotaging them, long before they realized an outside force was at play. While Cassidy and Ketch orchestrated the digital war, Jessie chafed. This world of shadows and data was not her stage. She was a performer, a creature of action and confrontation. She felt sidelined, a cavalry officer forced to learn accounting while the real battle was being fought elsewhere. She found her own role. While the commanders schemed, she became the hand in the street. She took James and Meowth and began to build a network of informants, of disgruntled workers, of petty criminals. She moved through the city's underbelly, not as a Team Rocket operative, but as a sympathetic ear, a provider of opportunities. She learned which security guards were sleeping on the job, which politicians had secrets to hide, which corporate aides felt undervalued. The head of Devon Corp's Saffron branch is having an affair with his secretary, she reported back to Ketch one evening, dropping a data chip onto the console. The secretary thinks he's going to leave his wife for her. He's not. She's angry. And she has access to his private files. Another time, the captain of the city's police force. His son was rejected from the Pokemon Trainer Academy. He blames the league's nepotism. He's feeling unappreciated. They were small things, threads of human weakness and discontent. But Ketch saw their value immediately. Cassidy was giving him control of the city's machine. Jessie was giving him control of its people. The two strategies, one cold and digital, one warm and human, began to intertwine, creating a perfect storm of destabilization. Their operations did not go unnoticed. The subtle disruptions, the growing paranoia, the small acts of sabotage, they were like tremors before an earthquake. And they attracted the attention of the city's psychic guardian. Sabrina was not a conventional gym leader. She was a seer, a prophet, a woman who existed in a state of perpetual, detached observation, her powerful psychic abilities giving her glimpses of the future, of the tangled web of probability. She felt their influence not as a direct attack, but as a discordant note in the symphony of her city, a thread of chaos pulling at the edges of her precognitive visions. She also attracted the attention of the Aegis Guard. The energy signature from the dissonance, now permanently bonded to Ketch, was a faint but constant beacon. While Cynthia focused on the larger hunt for the other temple sites, she dispatched two of her most suitable agents to investigate the strange political decay in Saffron, Will and Karen of the Giotto Elite Four. Will, a master of psychic illusion and misdirection, and Karen, a pragmatist who understood the power of darkness and fear. The game had new players. The first confrontation was a battle of ghosts. Will, attempting to psychically trace the source of the city's data corruption, found his own mind under assault. Ketch, feeling the psychic probe through the dissonance, didn't block it. He welcomed it. He opened a channel and fed Will not a defense, but a torrent of pure, chaotic data from the unraveled. Will, floating in a meditative trance in his hotel room, cried out and collapsed, clutching his head. He had expected to fight another psychic. He had not expected his mind to be flooded with the architectural plans of a dead star and the emotional spectrum of a color that did not exist. It was like trying to drink the ocean. He was forced to retreat, shaken and disoriented, having learned nothing but the terrifying, alien nature of his opponent's mind. Karen's approach was more direct. She used her network of underworld contacts to trace Jessie's movements. The two women finally met in a rain-slicked alleyway in the city's grimy industrial sector. It wasn't a formal battle. It was a warning. "You're playing a dangerous game," Karen said, emerging from the shadows, her Umbriana dark, silent predator at her side. "Upsetting the balance of a city like this, it has consequences." Jessie, flanked by Arbok and Weezing, didn't flinch. The scared, bumbling grunt was long gone. She was Ketch's senior operative. "We're not upsetting the balance," Jessie retorted, a confident smirk on her face. "We're creating a new one. There's a power in this city you don't understand," Karen warned, her voice low. "It will consume you. Power is for the ones who have the will to wield it," Jessie shot back, echoing a sentiment she had heard from Ketch a dozen times. "The rest are just spectators." The confrontation was a stalemate, a declaration of intent between two masters of the shadows. But it confirmed to the Aegis Guard that Team Rocket was at the heart of the city's decay. And it proved to Jessie that she was no longer a pawn. She had held her own against an Elite Four member, not with brute force, but with sheer, unshakable confidence. The thrill was intoxicating. The Saffron Gambit escalated. Using Cassidy's control of the data hub and Jessie's network of compromised individuals, they orchestrated a masterpiece of political theater. They leaked documents showing Sylph Company was secretly funding the political campaigns of the city council, framing it as a hostile takeover. They used their corrupt police captain to accidentally botch the investigation, making the league-appointed officials look incompetent. They used Marcus, their man inside Sylph, to plant evidence of corporate espionage on his own boss, the man who was feuding with Jessie's Eleanor Vance persona, tying up all their past and present operations in a neat, self-justifying bow. The city turned on itself. Corporate sponsors withdrew their funding from the Saffron Gym in protest. The public, whipped into a frenzy by manufactured news reports, began to demand Sabrina's resignation. The Indigo League, bogged down by the ghost attacks on their communications, was unable to mount a coherent response. Saffron was tearing itself apart from the inside out, and Ketch's team was fanning the flames. The final move belonged to Ketch himself. He sent a single, untraceable message to the one person who could end the chaos. "Saffron Gym. Midnight. Come alone. We need to talk." It was sent to Sabrina. The Saffron Gym was a maze of teleporter pads and empty, identical rooms, a physical manifestation of Sabrina's detached, labyrinthine mind. Ketch walked through it with a calm, purposeful stride, Pikachu at his side. The dissonance hummed within him, effortlessly navigating the spatial distortions, seeing the true path through the illusion. He arrived in the central chamber, the arena where countless challengers had faced their own fears. Sabrina was waiting for him, floating in the center of the room in a meditative pose, her eyes closed. Her Kadabra stood beside her, spoons held ready, its eyes glowing with psychic power. You have caused a great deal of chaos, Sabrina's voice echoed in his mind, not his ears. It was calm, detached, a scientist observing a curious phenomenon. Chaos is a tool, Ketch replied, his own voice spoken aloud, a solid, real thing in her psychic world. Like order. It depends on whose hand is wielding it. You are the source of the discord, she stated. The wrong note in the song of the future. I have seen glimpses of you. A boy cloaked in shadow, walking a path of ruin. The future you see is just one possibility, Ketch said, taking a step closer. The one your masters in the Aegis Guard want you to see. A future of rigid, unchanging order. A world locked in a cage to prevent it from ever growing. Sabrina's eyes snapped open. They were deep, empty pools that reflected nothing. You know of the Guard. I know they fear change, Ketch said. And I know they sent their pawns, Will and Karen, to clean up their mess. But they failed. Because they are trying to patch a system that is fundamentally broken. I am offering you a new one. You offer subjugation, her voice filled the room, cold and sharp. You offer the will of Team Rocket. I offer the will of a new world, Ketch corrected. One not bound by the dusty rules of ancient gods and secret societies. Team Rocket is a means to an end, Sabrina. Giovanni, the Aegis Guard, they are all just players in a game that is about to be overturned. He let a fraction of the dissonance bleed into his aura, projecting it not as an attack, but as an image, a concept, directly into her mind. Sabrina gasped, her body convulsing. Her serene detachment shattered. For the first time, she was not seeing a possible future. She was being shown a truth that existed outside of time. She saw the raw, formless chaos of the unraveled. She saw the birth of reality, the imposition of order. She saw the dissonance, not as an evil to be feared, but as a fundamental force of creation, of infinite possibility, that had been locked away. It was the very force she had spent her life trying to predict and control, but she had only ever seen its shadow. He was showing her the source of the fire. And then he showed her himself, a figure standing at the precipice, the living bridge between the two forces, capable of either enforcing the old order, or unmaking it to create something new. He pulled the vision back, leaving her trembling in the air, her face pale, her eyes wide with a terror and awe she had never known. You cannot fight it, Ketch said, his voice soft. But you do not have to be consumed by it. There is a third path. Join me. The city is in chaos because the old order is weak. Help me build a new one. A stronger one. This was his gambit. Not to defeat her, but to turn her. To recruit her. And if I refuse, she whispered, her voice shaking. Then I will break you, Ketch replied, his tone devoid of malice. It was a simple statement of fact. And I will break your city. But I would prefer not to. Your talent is a rare and valuable thing. It would be a waste to destroy it. He was offering her a choice, be a queen in a new world, or be a memory in the old one. The doors to the gym slammed open. Will and Karen stood there, their Pokémon at the ready, their faces grim. It's over, Rocket, Will said, his voice tense. You are surrounded. Ketch didn't even look at them. His eyes remained locked on Sabrina. The choice was hers. The city's fate rested on her decision. Sabrina looked from Ketch, the avatar of terrifying, world-shattering change, to the agents of the Aegis Guard, the enforcers of the rigid, predictable order she had served. She had spent her life seeing the future. For the first time, she had a chance to choose it. She closed her eyes. Leave, she said, her voice echoing with newfound power. Will and Karen looked at her, confused. Sabrina, what are you doing? He's the one we've been hunting. I said, leave, she repeated, and this time, the psychic command was an irresistible wave. The two Elite Four members cried out, clutching their heads, their Pokémon whining in distress. They were forced back, step by step, out of the gym, the doors slamming shut in their faces. Sabrina turned her gaze back to Ketch. A decision had been made. "Saffron City is yours, Commander," she said, a new, strange light in her eyes. "Show me what this new world looks like." Ketch gave a slight, satisfied smile. The gambit had paid off. He had not just conquered a city. He had gained a queen. From the rooftop across the city, Jessie and Cassidy watched the police cars and league officials, once surrounding the gym, pull back in confusion. They saw Will and Karen retreat, defeated not by force, but by a power they could not comprehend. Jessie let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. He had done it. He had walked into the lion's den and made the lion heel. Her heart swelled with a fierce, possessive pride. Cassidy watched, her mind cold and clear. He had just co-opted one of the most powerful psychics on the planet and decapitated the League's authority in Kanto's most critical city. He was moving beyond Giovanni's orders, accumulating power and assets for his own purposes. He was no longer a commander. He was a player in the great game. And she had hitched her wagon to a rising, blazing star. The thought was the most exhilarating of her life. Saffron was his. The knife was now firmly in his hand, and the Indigo League was bleeding. Chapter 7, Wrath of the Guardian. The sky over the Cerulean Cape was a canvas of bruised purple and angry orange as a storm gathered on the horizon. A fleet of 3 matte black helicopters, stripped of all markings, flew in a tight, aggressive formation, their rotors beating a brutal rhythm against the humid air. They flew low, hugging the jagged coastline, a trio of metal dragonflies skimming over the churning, white-capped waves. In the lead helicopter, Ketch sat in the command seat, the muted glow of a navigation display reflecting in his cold, focused eyes. The dissonance within him was a low, electric hum, a sixth sense that tasted the ozone in the air and felt the pressure drop of the coming storm. The resonant key from Sylph Company and the seismic data from Cinnabar had led them to this. In a secure, heavily reinforced transport case at his feet was the next piece of Giovanni's puzzle, a device salvaged from the ruins of the Seafoam Islands Research Lab, a facility his secondary teams had quietly plundered in the chaos following the Saffron Gambit. It was called the Harmonic Lure. According to Giovanni's fragmented intel, it was not a key, but an amplifier. A device designed to emit a specific, resonant frequency that would call to the other temple sites, making them easier to locate. It was a critical, and incredibly dangerous, piece of technology. His own faction was growing. Sabrina's neutrality in Saffron had effectively given him control of the city's resources. Agents who had once reported to other commanders were now quietly requesting transfers to his unit, drawn by the gravity of his success. He was becoming a power unto himself within Team Rocket, a fact that had not gone unnoticed by Giovanni, whose communications had become terser, more watchful. In the seat next to him, Cassidy monitored the fleet sensor arrays, her face a mask of professional concentration. Her transformation was complete. She no longer saw Ketch as a rival commander, but as the architect of a new order. Her counsel was sharp, her analysis flawless, her loyalty absolute and chillingly pragmatic. She was his perfect instrument of logic. The calm crackled. "Anything on the horizon, boss?" It was Jessie's voice, coming from the trailing helicopter. Her energy was a bright, defiant flame against the encroaching gloom. She commanded her own aircraft now, with James and Meowth as her trusted crew. She was his perfect instrument of passion. "Negative," Cassidy answered before Ketch could, her tone crisp. "Weather patterns are degrading, but the route is clear. We are 5 minutes from the rendezvous point. Just feels heavy out here." Jessie's voice came back, a note of unease in it. "Like we're being watched." Ketch felt it too. It was not a psychic probe or an aura signature. It was a vast, ancient, and deeply offended presence. The world itself. They had activated one temple, stolen the map to others, and were now carrying a beacon designed to shout their location to the remaining sites. The planet's immune system was beginning to take notice. Stay sharp, Ketch ordered, his voice cutting through the calm. All units, go to silent running. No unnecessary chatter. The command was instantly obeyed. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Below them, the sea had turned a dark, malevolent shade of indigo, the waves crashing against the cliffs with a hungry, percussive roar. And then it happened. It was not an attack. It was an arrival. The sea directly in front of the lead helicopter erupted. A colossal pillar of water, 100 feet high, shot into the air as if the ocean floor had been punched by a god. The helicopter veered sharply, its pilot shouting in alarm, fighting the violent turbulence. From the pillar of water, a shape emerged. It was vast, sleek, and terrifyingly majestic. A creature of silver and blue, with enormous, hand-like wings that beat the air with the force of a hurricane. Its eyes, ancient and intelligent, glowed with a cold, righteous fury. Lugia. It was not the same one from Cinnabar. That one had been a territorial guardian, angered by a localized intrusion. This one felt different. Older. More powerful. It was not here to protect a place. It was here to erase an infection. It was the guardian of the seas itself, the avatar of the ocean's wrath, drawn by the lure's resonant sacrilege. Evasive maneuvers. Ketch snapped, his voice ice-cold. There was no surprise, no panic. The dissonance within him had been screaming a warning for the last 10 minutes. He had been expecting something. All units, scatter formation. Do not engage. Your priority is escape. The helicopters broke formation, scattering like startled insects. But there was nowhere to run. Lugia let out a cry, a sound that was not a sound, but a psychic shockwave of pure command. Cease. The helicopter's engines sputtered. Their electronic systems flickered and died. The pilots wrestled with dead controls as the aircraft began to fall from the sky, helpless against the sheer force of the legendary's will. It's an EM field. Cassidy yelled over the roar of the wind, her hands flying over a dead console. Stronger than Cinnabar. It's overriding everything. They were plummeting toward the jagged rocks and furious sea. The old ways, then, Ketch said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. He unbuckled himself and grabbed a pokeball from his belt. Pidgeot, I need you. His Pidgeot burst from the ball, its powerful wings beating against the confines of the cabin. Ketch grabbed the transport case containing the lure. Pikachu, on my shoulder. Cassidy, get your Starmie ready. We're going out. He slammed his hand on the emergency release for the side door. It blew outwards, torn away by the wind. The roar of the storm and the divine fury of Lugia filled the cabin. He stood in the open doorway, the wind tearing at him, the helicopter spinning wildly. Below, he saw Jessie's helicopter, also falling, a plume of smoke trailing from its engine. Lugia fixed its gaze on him. It knew. It could feel the dissonance coiled within him, and it could sense the blasphemous song of the harmonic lure in the case. It opened its mouth, and a swirling vortex of blue energy began to form, an aeroblast powerful enough to atomize the entire fleet. Ketch acted. He didn't fight the god. He used its own power against it. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Aim for the water, right below it. Pikachu, clinging to his shoulder, unleashed a massive bolt of lightning. It struck the churning sea, and a huge cloud of steam and electrified mist erupted upwards, momentarily obscuring Lugia's vision and disrupting the formation of the aeroblast. Now, Pidgeot. Ketch leaped from the dying helicopter, out into the open, storm-tossed air. Pidgeot dove, catching him with an expert grace that spoke of 1,000 hours of shared flight. They banked sharply, the transport case held tight in Ketch's grip, the force of the maneuver threatening to tear his arm from its socket. He had become the target, drawing the god's attention away from the others. Lugia, its attack scattered, turned its immense, furious gaze on the boy and the bird who dared to defy it. The other two helicopters, their pilots momentarily regaining some control as Lugia's focus shifted, were still in mortal danger. Cassidy's helicopter, its tail rotor damaged, was spinning in a flat, uncontrolled descent directly towards the cliffs. She had her Starmie out, its psychic energy trying in vain to slow their fall. Jessie's helicopter was in even worse shape. The engine had completely failed. As it fell, the main rotor blades clipped a rocky spire, and the entire aircraft lurched violently. Jessie was thrown against the open cargo door. For a heart-stopping second, her fingers scrabbled for a hold, but the violent motion was too much. She lost her grip and was flung out into the screaming wind, a flash of magenta against the gray sky, tumbling towards the raging sea below. Jessie! James's panicked scream was a faint, tinny cry over the calm before it cut out. Ketch saw it all. In the chaotic, swirling vortex of the storm, his mind, augmented by the dissonance, processed it with terrifying clarity. Cassidy, spinning towards the rocks. Jessie, falling towards the waves. He was caught between them, a choice between two lives, with a god preparing to erase all three of them. There was no time for choice. There was only time for will. He didn't make a decision. He became the decision. He let go. Not of the case, not of Pidgeot. He let go of the rigid control he had maintained over the dissonance since the temple. He opened the floodgates. His aura, the golden light of his own life force, erupted from him in a massive, uncontrolled wave. It was no longer a shield or a tool. It was a statement. Mine. The dissonance, the black, chaotic energy of the unraveled, surged with it, intertwining, creating a visible, expanding sphere of black and gold energy that pulsed outwards from his body. It was a raw, untamed manifestation of his will to protect, to keep. The sphere of power slammed into Lugia's nascent aeroblast, not deflecting it, but unmaking it. The ordered energy of the attack dissolved into harmless photons and static. Lugia let out a cry of shock, recoiling as if it had touched a hot stove. It had tried to attack a person, it had found itself punching a hole in reality. The expanding wave of power did not stop. It washed over Cassidy's helicopter, and the chaotic energy did not buffer it, but rewrote its trajectory. For a fraction of a second, the laws of gravity and momentum ceased to apply. The helicopter's uncontrolled spin arrested, and it settled onto a wide, flat ledge of rock with a jarring, but survivable, crunch. At the same time, the other side of the wave reached Jessie. She was 10 feet from the water, from a certain death on the rocks hidden beneath the waves. The wave of dissonant aura hit her not as a solid force, but as a cushion of warped space. Her terrifying descent slowed to a gentle drift, and she landed in the churning water with a soft splash, the impact no more jarring than falling into a bed of pillows. The effort was titanic. The simultaneous, multivector application of reality-warping power drained him completely. The black and gold light vanished, collapsing back into him. The strength went out of his limbs. His vision tunneled. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Lugia, hovering in the sky, its fury replaced by a profound, cautious awe. It had encountered something new. Something that was not of the order it served, nor of the pure chaos it was sworn to fight. It had encountered a third thing. A hybrid. A paradox. He slumped forward, unconscious, held aloft only by the loyalty of his Pidgeot, who circled frantically, trying to rouse him. He woke to the smell of antiseptic and the soft, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. He was in a clean, white room, the standard interior of a Team Rocket mobile medical bay. He tried to sit up, a groan escaping his lips. His entire body felt like a single, massive bruise, and his head throbbed with the phantom echo of a supernova. "Easy, boss. You took a nasty fall." He looked up. Jessie was sitting in a chair by his bedside. Her hair was still damp, her face pale and etched with worry, but she was alive. Whole. In a chair across the room, Cassidy stood with her arms crossed, her usual cold composure replaced by a quiet, watchful intensity. Her arm was in a sling, but she too was alive. "Report," Ketch rasped, his voice raw. "We got out," Cassidy said, her voice tight. "After your display, the legendary creature retreated. It just left. James and Meowth managed to land their chopper on the beach. Butch and I were grounded on the cliffs. We regrouped. We recovered you. And the lure." She gestured to the transport case, which sat in the corner of the room, looking deceptively innocuous. "Casualties?" "Minor injuries," Jessie said softly. "Bruises, a few scrapes." Cassidy dislocated her shoulder. "We were lucky." "No, you were incredible." He looked at his hands. They were trembling slightly. The dissonance was quiet, dormant, but he could feel the emptiness it had left behind, the chasm of power he had expended. "It was an uncontrolled release," he said, more to himself than to them. "A tactical error." "It was not an error," Cassidy's voice was sharp, cutting through his self-recrimination. She walked to the foot of his bed, her good eye fixing him with a stare of unnerving intensity. "I have been rerunning the sensor logs from my recovered equipment. What you did, it should not be possible. You simultaneously manipulated kinetic energy, spatial orientation, and gravitational force across 3 separate vectors. It was not an attack. It was a localized revision of physical law. An act of will imposed upon reality." She paused, her expression a mixture of clinical awe and something else, something deeper. "At Cinnabar, I thought you were a brilliant strategist. In the temple, I thought you had become a conduit for a new form of energy. I was wrong. You are not a conduit. You are the source. The dissonance and your aura did not just merge. They created something new. And it answers to you." Jessie looked from Cassidy's intense, analytical face to Ketch's pale, exhausted one. Cassidy had seen an event of cosmic significance, a shift in the balance of global power. Jessie had seen the man she cared for sacrifice himself to save her life. She reached out, her fingers gently brushing his hand. His skin was cold. "You saved me." Her voice was a whisper, thick with an emotion she could no longer hide. "I was falling, and you saved me." He looked at her, and in that moment, the commander, the strategist, the living weapon, was gone. He was just a young man, exhausted and vulnerable, looking at the woman who had pulled him from one abyss, just as he had pulled her from another. The connection between them was no longer a question of loyalty or command. It was a simple, undeniable truth. Cassidy watched this silent, profound exchange, and for the first time, she felt a genuine, undeniable pang of loss. She had bet on his power, his ambition, his intellect. She had offered him her loyalty, her strategic brilliance, her mind. But Jessie had, without conscious thought, offered him her heart. And in a world of gods and monsters, it was the one currency that seemed to matter more. She had made a strategic miscalculation. She had chosen the wrong battlefield. The moment was broken by the hiss of the door. A Team Rocket doctor entered, followed by a grim-faced Giovanni. The leader of Team Rocket looked at the scene, Ketch, weak and vulnerable in the bed, Jessie's hand on his, Cassidy standing watch like a hawk, and his expression was unreadable. "Commander," Giovanni said, his voice smooth as silk, but with an underlying edge of steel. "A truly spectacular performance. The energy spike was visible from my command center in Viridian. You have not only proven the dissonance can be weaponized, you have proven you are its master." He stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with a triumphant, possessive light. "Your display has confirmed the location of the final 2 temple sites. The lure is no longer necessary. The Aegis Guard will be reeling, trying to understand what they just witnessed. The time to strike is now. The final phase of my plan begins today." He looked down at Ketch, a predator smiling at his prized weapon. "Rest, Commander. Heal. You have a world to unmake." Giovanni swept out of the room, leaving a chilling silence in his wake. Ketch looked at Jessie, then at Cassidy. The game had changed. His secret was out. Giovanni now saw him not as a commander, but as the key to his apocalyptic endgame. The Aegis Guard now saw him not as a rogue agent, but as a metaphysical threat to reality itself. He was caught, exposed, a king on a chessboard with enemies on all sides. And his two most powerful pieces, the two women who had vied for his favor, were now looking at him with a new, terrifying clarity. The contest was over. All that was left was the war. Chapter 8, The Rubicon. The air in the Viridian gym was not the familiar scent of training and desperation. It was the charged, sterile hum of an engine warming up, a weapon being primed. The public gym, long closed for renovations, was a hollow shell. The true heart of the facility, Giovanni's personal command center and hidden laboratory, was a hive of frantic, purposeful activity. Agents in black uniforms moved with a silent, nervous urgency, their faces grim with the enormity of what was about to happen. Ketch stood before the floor-to-ceiling window in Giovanni's penthouse office, staring down at the city he had left behind so many months ago. It seemed a lifetime ago. He was dressed in a new uniform, one Giovanni had personally commissioned. It was simple, black, and unadorned, but the material was a strange, non-reflective fabric that seemed to absorb the light, and it was threaded with microcircuitry designed to help him channel the dissonant energy. It felt less like a uniform and more like a harness. The week since the battle with Lugia had been a blur of forced recovery and intense, chilling briefings. Giovanni had laid his cards on the table, his vision no longer shrouded in metaphor. The resonant keys, the harmonic lure, the seismic data, they were all components for a massive focusing device he had built in the secret laboratory deep beneath the gym. A machine designed to amplify a user's aura, turning them into a global antenna. An antenna that would broadcast a single, resonant command across the planet, awakening the final two temples, the prisons of fire and ice, and using their combined energy to tear open the primary rift, the chamber where the bulk of the dissonance had been sealed away at the dawn of time. It will not be an apocalypse, Ketch, Giovanni had explained, his eyes burning with fanatical light as he gestured to a holographic model of the planet, a web of glowing energy lines converging on Viridian City. It will be a purification. A reset. The laws of Arceus, the rigid, unyielding order he imposed upon the universe, will be dissolved. Reality will revert to its primordial, chaotic state. A blank canvas. And we, you and I, with your mastery of the dissonance, will be the artists. We will paint a new world, one governed not by arbitrary laws, but by will. Our will. You will not just be a king, Ketch. You will be a god. The offer hung in the air between them, a promise of infinite power at the cost of everything. Now, standing at the window, Ketch felt the focusing device thrumming through the floor beneath his feet. He could feel its immense power, its hunger to connect with the dissonance inside him. He had been brought to the brink, to the final, irrevocable choice. The Rubicon. The door behind him hissed open. Jessie and Cassidy entered. They too wore new, combat-ready uniforms. The unspoken rivalry between them had been burned away by the events at the Cape, replaced by a tense, united front. Their loyalty was no longer a question of which of them he would favor, but whether they would follow him over this final cliff. All systems are green, Cassidy reported, her voice a tight, controlled monotone. The focusing array is at 98% charge. Giovanni is waiting for you in the primary lab. She paused, her analytical eyes searching his face. His personal guard is with him. They're not ceremonial. They're prepared for a fight. The implication was clear, they were prepared for betrayal. Jessie stepped forward, her expression a storm of conflicting emotions. You don't have to do this, she said, her voice a low, urgent plea. This isn't what you wanted. This isn't about making a better world. This is about ending it. There's still time. We can fight our way out. We can disappear. She was offering him an escape. A life on the run, a future as fugitives. It was a desperate, hopeful gesture. And go where, Jessie? Ketch asked, his voice quiet, turning from the window to face them. The Aegis Guard is hunting me. Giovanni wants to use me as a living apocalypse key. There is no corner of the world we could hide in where they wouldn't find us. Disappearing is not a strategy. It's a slow death. He looked from Jessie's passionate, pleading face to Cassidy's cold, pragmatic one. The choice was not just his own. It was theirs. Giovanni's plan is to unmake reality, he said. The Aegis Guard's plan is to preserve a flawed, unjust reality. Both are unacceptable. He took a breath, the dissonance within him stirring, recognizing the declaration of a new path. So I will choose a third option. I will not be Giovanni's key. And I will not be the guard's prisoner. I will take the power for myself. It was a declaration of war. Against everyone. Cassidy's eyes widened, a sudden, brilliant flare of understanding and ambition in their depths. This was the move she had been waiting for. The ultimate gambit. Not to serve the king, or to replace the king, but to build a new kingdom from the ashes of the old. You intend to seize control of the focusing device, she stated, her mind already racing through the tactical implications. Use it not to unleash the dissonance, but to fully integrate it. To make yourself its permanent master, independent of Giovanni. Exactly, Ketch confirmed. Jessie stared at him, her hope for escape dying, replaced by a terrifying, exhilarating awe. He wasn't running. He was staging a coup at the end of the world. But you can't fight them both, she whispered. Giovanni's forces, the Aegis Guard, they'll tear you apart. Not if they're too busy fighting each other, Ketch said, a cold, sharp smile touching his lips for the first time. Just as he spoke, the entire gym shuddered. A distant, percussive boom echoed from the surface level, followed by the shriek of tearing metal and the blare of alarms. Red alert lights began to flash throughout the penthouse. On a security monitor, an image appeared, the roof of the Viridian gym, blasted open. A sleek, Garchomp-shaped ship was hovering over the breach, and from it, trainers were descending on repulsor lift platforms. At their head was Lance, his cape whipping in the wind, his Dragonite roaring a challenge. And beside him, Cynthia, her face a mask of grim determination. The Aegis Guard had launched their final, desperate assault. How? Cassidy breathed, staring at the monitor. Our security, our stealth fields, they shouldn't have been able to find us, let alone breach the outer perimeter so easily. I sent them an invitation, Ketch said calmly. He tapped a device on his wrist, and the monitor's display changed, showing a data packet sent from an untraceable address an hour earlier. It contained the complete architectural plans of the Viridian gym, its security weaknesses, and the precise location of the focusing device's power core. A gift. To ensure they arrived at exactly the right moment. He had summoned the wolves to the door of his enemy. Jessie and Cassidy stared at him, speechless. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of his plan was beyond anything they could have imagined. He was playing a game on a level they were only just beginning to comprehend. Giovanni's forces will now be locked in a desperate battle with the most powerful trainers in the world, Ketch explained, his voice cutting through the rising din of battle from below. In the ensuing chaos, we will make our move. We fight our way to the primary lab, I seize control of the device, and we use the battle as cover for our escape. He looked at them, his eyes burning with an intensity that demanded an answer. The old world is ending, one way or another. I am offering you a chance to be at the center of the new one. Are you with me? The choice was no longer about love or loyalty, strategy or ambition. It was about belief. Did they believe in him? Cassidy was the first to answer. A slow, cold, utterly committed smile spread across her face. This was everything she had ever wanted, a leader with the vision and the ruthlessness to burn the whole rotten system to the ground and build something better. To the end of the line, Commander. Ketch then looked at Jessie. Her face was a canvas of fear and awe. This was not the future she had imagined. It was a terrifying leap into an unknown war. But she looked at the man standing before her, no longer the boy she knew, not yet the god he might become, but a leader of impossible will, and she knew there was no other path for her. Her place was at his side. In the heat of the moment, with the world falling apart around them, the final choice was made not with words, but with a simple, profound action. She stepped forward and took his offered hand. Her fingers laced with his, a solid, grounding connection in the heart of the storm. Always, she whispered. The touch was a quiet confirmation, an anchor in the chaos. In that shared glance, a bond was forged that was deeper than strategy, more potent than power. He had made his choice. Jessie was his anchor. Cassidy was his sword. With them at his side, he was complete. Let's go, Ketch commanded, his voice ringing with absolute authority. It's time to claim our future. They burst from the office, not as fugitives, but as conquerors. The corridors of the gym were a war zone. Team Rocket agents clashed with Elite Four members in brutal, explosive Pokémon battles. A Macamp wrestled with a golem in a shower of sparks and pulverized concrete. A Houndoom's flamethrower was met by the chilling blast of a Lapraza's ice beam. Ketch, Jessie, and Cassidy were a surgical strike team amidst the chaos. They didn't engage in prolonged battles. They moved with a lethal, unified purpose. On your left. Cassidy shouted, and her tentacruel unleashed a barrage of toxic spikes, cutting off a flanking attack from one of Lance's dragon tamer disciples. Arbok, glare. Jessie commanded, and her Pokémon's paralyzing gaze froze a charging Tauros in its tracks, allowing them to slip past. Ketch himself was a force of nature. He didn't need to shout commands. His connection with Pikachu was so perfect, so instantaneous, that they moved as one being. A quick attack to disable a trainer's Pokeball hand. An iron tail to sever a power line, plunging a corridor into darkness. A precisely aimed thunder shock to short-circuit a security drone. He flowed through the battle, the dissonance guiding his movements, showing him the paths of least resistance, the points of maximum leverage. They fought their way down, level by level, towards the heart of the gym. They finally reached the massive, reinforced blast doors of the primary laboratory. They were sealed. It's no use. Cassidy said, examining the lock. It's a genetic failsafe. It requires Giovanni's DNA to open. Then we'll make our own door, Ketch said. He placed his hand on the thick, metallic surface of the door. He closed his eyes, focusing the dissonance. The air grew cold. The black, smoky energy swirled around his hand, no longer just an aura, but a physical manifestation. The metal of the door began to groan, to warp, not from heat or force, but from a localized corruption of its molecular structure. It was turning to a brittle, crystalline rust. With a final push of will, the center of the blast door dissolved into a shower of black dust, revealing the chamber beyond. The primary laboratory was a cathedral of science and ambition. In the center, the focusing device rose like a dark metal tree, its branches crackling with contained power. At its base stood Giovanni, flanked by his Persian and his elite royal guard, their faces grim. He was watching the battle outside on a massive monitor, a faint, amused smile on his face. He turned as they entered, his smile not wavering. Ketch. I must admit, I'm disappointed. I expected this betrayal. But to invite the flies into my home yourself? It's a bold, if short-sighted, move. You saw me as a key, Giovanni, Ketch said, stepping into the room, Jessie and Cassidy flanking him. You were mistaken. I am the hand that will turn it. Giovanni laughed, a deep, resonant sound. You think you can control it? The dissonance is chaos incarnate. It cannot be tamed. It can only be unleashed. You are a vessel, nothing more. A glorious, powerful vessel, but a vessel nonetheless. He gestured to the device. But, you have forced my hand. The array is not at full power, but it will be enough. We will begin the new world now, together, whether you wish it or not. He slammed his hand down on the activation panel. The focusing device roared to life. Arcs of purple and black energy leaped from its spire, converging on the crystal at its apex. A beam of pure, concentrated energy shot downwards, striking Ketch in the chest. It was not an attack. It was an activation. The device synced with the dissonance inside him, amplifying it 1,000-fold. The power was immense, agonizing. He cried out, staggering, his body convulsing as the energy of the cosmos poured through him. You see? Giovanni shouted over the roar. You cannot fight it. Now, let it go. Unleash it. Unmake the world. But Ketch, on his knees, his body wreathed in black lightning, looked up. His eyes were no longer human. They were twin black holes, swirling with the raw, untamed chaos of the void. But in their center was a single, defiant point of golden light. His will. No, he gritted out, his voice a distorted chorus of 1,000,000 whispers. He was not just channeling the power. He was seizing it. He fought back. He pushed his own will, his own aura, into the torrent of energy, not to stop it, but to hijack it. The beam of energy connecting him to the machine began to flicker, its color shifting from pure black to a swirling vortex of black and gold. He was wrestling with Giovanni for the soul of the machine. Impossible. Giovanni roared, his composure finally breaking. No one can command that much power. Royal Guard, subdue him. Take him down. The guards charged, their powerful Pokémon, a Nidoking and a Rhyperior, bounding forward. They're not getting near him. Jessie screamed, a warrior's fire in her eyes. Cassidy, now. The two women moved to intercept, a perfectly coordinated whirlwind of action. It was a desperate, hopeless fight. They were outnumbered and outmatched. But they were not trying to win. They were trying to buy him time. As the battle raged around him, Ketch fought his own war. He poured every ounce of his being, his history, his pain, his ambition, into this one singular moment of defiance. He remembered the humiliation at the Indigo League, the cold betrayal, the storm on Route 1. He remembered the whispers in the temple, the terror and awe of looking into the abyss. He remembered Jessie's hand in his, the grounding weight of Cassidy's loyalty. He took it all, every piece of himself, and forged it into a weapon. With a final, reality-shattering scream that was both his and not, he won. The energy beam turned from black to pure, brilliant gold. He had seized control. The dissonance was his. He rose to his feet, no longer a vessel, but a master. He was a living key, a walking catalyst, the power to unmake and remake reality, now an extension of his own body. He looked at Giovanni, his eyes burning with the light of a new star. With a flick of his wrist, the focusing device overloaded and exploded, showering the lab in a rain of dead, useless metal. The primary threat was neutralized. At that exact moment, the main wall of the laboratory was blown inwards by a colossal hyperbeam. Lance and Cynthia stood in the breach, their Pokémon ready, their faces grim. They saw the destroyed device. They saw Giovanni's battered forces. And they saw Ketch, glowing with an impossible, terrifying power. He was no longer a Team Rocket commander. He was no longer an Aegis Guard target. He was a third power. A king in exile, a god in nascent form, holding the trigger to a cosmic weapon inside his own soul. Hunted by the remnants of a criminal empire and the full might of the world's secret protectors, his journey was not over. It was just beginning. He looked at Jessie and Cassidy, who stood ready at his side. He gave them a sharp, confident nod. And together, they vanished in a flash of black and gold light, leaving the ruins of the gym, and the entire old world, behind them. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.